The alarm in the containment wing did not sound like a warning. It sounded like a request, three descending tones that meant a keeper had abandoned a post, and Instructor Mayhew had already crossed half the observation gallery before the tones finished repeating. Below, behind 40 centimeters of laminate glass, rated to stop a Thren boarding lance, the animal from the Deathworld was doing nothing at all. That was the problem. That had been the problem for 9 days. Mayhew pressed two of her forward limbs to the rail and watched the yard the way she had learned to watch weather on her homeworld, for the thing that was about to happen and had not started yet. The carnivore lay along the low sunshelf under the daylight panels, its enormous head on its forepaws, its eyes half closed. Orange and cream and a wash of winter gray along its flanks, banded in black that broke its shape apart so that even at rest it seemed to be three animals overlapping. It weighed more than any two Thren cadets. It was breathing slowly. It had not moved when the keeper ran. The keeper had run because the animal had looked at him. "Report," Mayhew said into her collar bead, and the wing coordinator's voice came back thin and fast. Handler Second Yesuvin withdrew from the feeding corridor. He states the subject tracked him through the wall. Through the wall. He says it was watching the corridor before he entered it. He says it knew he was coming. Mayhew did not answer that. She had reviewed the interior logs herself 4 times, and she had reached the same conclusion the keeper had, which was worse than the keeper's because she had the training to know what it meant. The animal did not pace. It did not throw itself at the glass or scream at the panels or foul its water in distress, the way the mid-tier predators from the surveyed worlds always did in the first cycle of captivity. It watched. It learned the schedule. On the 3rd day it had begun waiting at the feeding hatch before the hatch opened, not in hunger. It left half the ration, but in the flat, unhurried certainty of something that had decided the schedule belonged to it now, and was letting the schedule continue as a courtesy. Predators recognized predators. Every civilized species in the conquered had come up from something with teeth, and they carried the old machinery under the language, the part of the mind that measured a room and found the exits. The trouble with the Deathworld carnivore was that the old machinery, in every Thren and Kevani and Salmari who stood at this rail, returned the same reading, and the reading was, "You are prey, and it is not hungry yet." "Where is Provost Sale?" Mayhew asked. "Inbound. He has filed for a hazard disposition hearing." Of course he had. They convened it in the small hall off the containment wing, which meant everyone at the table could hear, faintly, the low subaudible thrum the animal made when it was content, a sound Mayhew had recorded and could not stop hearing even when it was not being made. The Thren on the disposition board sat with their dorsal plates high and locked, which in their species meant a fear they were too senior to name. Warden Provost Sale stood rather than sat. He was old for a Thren, his chitin gone the gray of weathered stone at the joints, and he had run the Ashran Combined Academy for 11 cycles without losing a cadet, a record he mentioned the way other people mentioned their children. "The specimen," Sale said, "was recovered from a private hold. It has no diplomatic standing. It is not a registered sapient. It is an apex-class carnivore from an unratified deathworld, and it has, in 9 days, cost this academy 1 keeper's nerve, 3 failed pacification attempts, and the use of an entire training wing. I am asking the board to authorize humane disposal before it costs us a cadet." "It has injured no one," Mayhew said. "It has done nothing," Sale said, "with a patience I find more alarming than an attack I could plan against. Adjunct Mayhew, you are a xenobiologist. Tell the board it is safe to keep." Mayhew did not tell the board it was safe to keep. She was Salmari, and her people did not lie easily. The pigment ran wrong under the skin, and everyone could see it. "I cannot," she said. "I can tell the board that it has declined 4 opportunities to hurt a keeper and taken none of them. That is not the behavior of a mindless hazard. That is the behavior of something making a decision. Making a decision, Sale repeated, is precisely what frightens me. It was the most honest thing he had said, and the board heard it, and their plates went higher. The disposal motion would have carried. Mayhew could count votes. She had counted these before she sat down. What stopped it was the thing that stopped everything at the Ashran Academy that season, the small legal splinter that no one had thought to remove because no one had thought it would matter. The animal was from Earth. And Earth, having joined the Conquered as a probationary signatory 11 months prior, had exactly one accredited representative anywhere within 19 days' transit of the Ashran Ring. A first-year exchange cadet, enrolled in the general cohort, currently, according to the roster, asleep. You cannot dispose of another polity's biological asset, said the board's legal adjunct, a soft gray Salmari elder named Asefal who enjoyed this far more than the situation warranted, without either that polity's waiver or the counter-signature of its accredited local representative. The human cadet is the accredited local representative. She is 14 years of age by their reckoning, translated no, 20 of their years. She is a first year. Then wake the first year, Sale said, and have her sign the waiver. Cadet Ren Halloran did not sign the waiver. She came to the containment wing at the 6th hour with her hair still flat on one side from the bunk and a tray from the cohort mess balanced on one forearm, and she stood in the observation gallery looking down at the animal for a long time, and the first thing she said, to no one in particular, was, "He's a Siberian, amur if you want to be exact. Somebody kept him warm his whole life. Look at the coat, that's not a wild coat, that's a fed coat." "Cadet," said Sale, who had come down personally to obtain the signature, "the board requires." "Where'd you get him?" The wing coordinator answered before Sale could stop her. "A private hold." "A collector. The transport was intercepted for other violations. The animal was aboard, frozen manifest mostly. He was the only survivor of the live cargo." Ren nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected and not liked. "How long's he been in the box?" 9 days here. We do not know how long before." "And what have you tried?" The coordinator recited it. Chemical sedation, twice, aborted both times when the dosing model returned a lethal margin they could not narrow, because no one in the Conquered had a metabolic profile for a deathworld apex, and the guesses ran either useless or fatal. Sonic deterrence, which the animal had ignored so completely that the technicians assumed the emitters had failed. A pacification drone with a capture net, which the animal had watched approach, and then had stood once to its full height, at which point the drone's operator had recalled the drone without being ordered to, and later could not explain why. Ren listened to all of it with the tray still on her arm. When the coordinator finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, in the flat way that Mayhew would come to know as the human's whole personality, "Yeah, he's not going to let you do any of that." "He is an animal," Sale said. "He's a tiger," Ren said, as if these were different categories, which, it would turn out, they were. You don't let a tiger let you do things. You make it not worth his while to stop you. You've been making it very worth his while." She looked at the tray on her arm, then down at the great striped shape on the sunshelf, and something in her face settled. "Can I go down?" The hall went so still that the animal's low thrum came up through the floor. "Absolutely not," said Sale. "Then I'm not signing your waiver," Ren said, "because I don't have enough information to sign it, and where I'm from we don't put down an animal we haven't tried to understand. That's not squeamishness. That's just how you end up with dead keepers. You want my counter-signature. Let me see him, not the tank, the feeding corridor. Behind the inner mesh, I'm not stupid. I want to sit where he can see me, and I want to have my breakfast." "Your breakfast?" "I skipped it," Ren said, "to come down here and look at your problem. I'd like it back." Mayhew argued for it. She would think about that later, that of everyone in the hall. It was the xenobiologist and not the security officers who put her professional standing behind letting a 20-year-old carry a tray of grain porridge into a corridor 12 meters from an unsedated deathworld carnivore. She argued for it because of the thing the human had said without seeming to know it was important. He's not going to let you do any of that. Not asterisk it asterisk. He. The keeper Yesuvin, who had spent 6 days feeding the animal, still called it the specimen. The human had been in the wing for a quarter of an hour and had already given it a gender, an origin, a life before the box, and a name for what it was that was not the name in the file. That was Data, Mayhew trusted Data. They put Ren in the feeding corridor behind the secondary mesh, which was thin, which was honest, which everyone understood would not stop the animal for more than the length of one decision. They positioned 2 marksmen on the gallery with capture ordnance and 1 with lethal, and Sale stood at the rail with his plates locked so high he looked half again his height, and Mayhew stood beside him with a recorder running and her 3 hearts going at a speed she did not enjoy. Below, Ren Halloran sat down on the corridor floor with her back against the mesh, cross-legged, the tray in her lap. She did not look at the animal. She looked at her food. She picked up the spoon and she began, without hurry, to eat her breakfast. The tiger opened its eyes. Mayhew heard beside her the small dry click of sails, breathing valves closing. The animal did not rise. It lifted its head from its paws, slow as a door swinging, and it looked at the human sitting on the floor of the corridor eating grain porridge with her spoon, and the yellow eyes went to her and stayed. Its ears turned forward. Its tail, thick as a thren's arm, moved once along the shelf, a single unhurried sweep, and was still. Ren ate. She did not talk to it. She did not coo or click her tongue or make the small submissive noises the keepers had been trained to make. She ate her porridge in the deliberate, bored, unbothered way of a person eating breakfast alone in a place she found neither dangerous nor interesting. And every 20 or 30 seconds she took a slow breath that Mayhew's recorder caught, a long, even exhale, the kind of breathing a psalmody medic would prescribe to slow a racing heart. She was doing it on purpose. Mayhew understood that at once. The human was not calm. The human was choosing to be calm loudly with her whole body, in a frequency the animal could read, and the animal was reading it. "What is she doing?" Sale said. It was not really a question. His plates had not come down. "She is telling it," Mayhew said slowly, "that there is no emergency. She is the first creature it has seen in 9 days who is not afraid of it. I think, Provost, I think it has been waiting for one." For 11 minutes nothing happened, which is to say everything happened. Ren finished her porridge. She set the spoon in the bowl. She did not get up. She sat with her empty tray in her lap and her back to the mesh, and she let her head tip back against the mesh so that if the animal had wanted her throat, it had never in its life been offered anything so freely, and she closed her eyes. The tiger rose. 3 marksmen took up slack on 3 triggers. Mayhew put out 1 limb, palm down, the psalmody sign for *hold, and prayed to nothing in particular that the humans really were as durable as their reputation. The animal crossed the yard. It did not stalking as fast at the end. It walked, its shoulders rolling, its great head low, and it came to the mesh where the human sat with her eyes closed and her throat bare, and it stopped, and it lowered itself to the floor on the other side of the thin barrier, close, so close that, when it let its breath out, the human's flat hair stirred. And it put its head down on its paws. And it began, very low, to make the sound Mayhew had recorded and could not stop hearing. The content sound. The sound it made when nothing in the world was wrong. Ren Halloran opened her eyes. She did not smile. She looked at the enormous animal lying against the mesh with its head on its paws and arm's length from her spine, and she said, quietly, the first words she had spoken to it. "There you are." Then she looked up at the gallery, at the 3 marksmen and the ancient furious frightened provost and the xenobiologist with her recorder, and she said, in the same flat voice, "I'm not signing your waiver. I'll be back at the 6th hour tomorrow. Somebody put his breakfast on my schedule, not yours. He eats when I eat. The recording of that morning was, within a day, the most viewed file on the Ashran cohort network, and within 3 days it had left the ring entirely, and Mayhew, who had made it, spent a great deal of the intervening time trying to explain to increasingly senior people that no, the human had not used a device. No, she had not been dosed with a pacifier. No, there was no scent mask, no ultrasonic collar, no gene-tailored pheromone. There was a 20-year-old and a bowl of grain and 11 minutes of breathing. That cannot be all, said the third senior person, a fleet xenobiologist 2 ranks above Mayhew, who had reviewed the file from a birth 6 days out and did not believe it. I have said the same thing to myself 40 times, Mayhew told him. I keep arriving at the same place. It is all. She sat down and ate and did not lie to it. Predators can smell a lie. Predators cannot smell a lie. The deathworld ones, Mayhew said, appear to smell everything. The thing she did not put in her report, because she could not yet defend it, was the part she was most certain of. She had watched a great many animals in a great many boxes. She had watched them break, and she had watched them submit, and she had watched them go the flat, quiet way that meant they had stopped wanting to be alive. The tiger from Earth had done none of those. It had spent 9 days not breaking, not submitting, not surrendering, waiting, with the enormous economy of a thing that knew exactly how dangerous it was, and had simply declined to prove it to anyone who hadn't asked the right way. And then a small, tired human had walked in and asked the right way, which was, she had not asked at all. She had brought her breakfast into its house and eaten it and shown it the back of her neck, and the animal had understood the grammar of that instantly, because it was the oldest grammar there was, older than the Concord and its treaties, older than language. I am not your enemy, and I am not your food, and I am not afraid of you, and here we both are. Sale filed to have the hearing postponed rather than lost. It was the first ground he had given in 11 cycles, and he gave it, Mayhew suspected, not because his mind had changed, but because he had seen the same thing she had, and it had frightened him worse than the animal ever could, because a hazard you can plan against, and a hazard that has decided to be gentle on its own terms, for reasons of its own, is not a hazard you control. It is a neighbor, and Warden Provost Sale had not survived 11 cycles by acquiring neighbors he could not remove. At the 6th hour the next morning, Cadet Ren Halloran came down to the containment wing with a tray from the mess, and found the tiger already at the mesh, waiting, its head up, its ears forward, watching the corridor before she entered it. The way it had watched the corridor before the keeper entered it, 9 days running, except that this time when the door opened the animal's tail swept the floor once slow, and its breath went out in the low-content thrum before she had taken a single step. Morning, Ren said, and sat down and had her breakfast. By the 4th morning, it had a shape the whole cohort could recite. At the 6th hour the human went to the mess and drew her ration grain porridge, a wedge of the pale protein loaf, a mug of the black bitter stimulant the humans called coffee, and that the Thren found medically alarming, and she carried it down 2 levels to the containment wing, and she sat in the feeding corridor behind the thin mesh, and she ate. The tiger came to the mesh. It lay down. It made the content sound. She ate slowly and breathed slowly and said nothing much. And when she finished she sat a while, and then she stood and she said, "Back tomorrow." And she left, and the animal watched her go and then went back to its sun shelf and lay in the daylight panels like a thing carved out of amber and did not move again until the next 6th hour. The cohort took to watching. There was no rule against it. The observation gallery held 40, and by the 5th morning it held 40, and the overflow stood in the corridor outside and watched on their beads. Cadets who had never spoken to the single human in their year now knew her schedule better than their own. A Kivani second year started a wagering pool on how close the animal would lie to the mesh each day, and lost interest in 3 days because the answer, once the animal trusted the pattern, was always the same. As close as the mesh allowed, its spine along the barrier, its head near her hip, the whole enormous striped length of it pressed to the thin wire like a house cat against a shin. Mayhew logged all of it. She had requisitioned the wing's full sensor suite and turned it, quietly, from a containment array into an observation array. And the difference in those two words was the difference in her whole reading of the situation, and she suspected the provost knew it, and she did it anyway. What the sensors told her was stranger than the video. The animal's resting cortisol analog, she had a profile now, built from the water it drank and the shed hair it left on the shelf, had been, for its first 9 days, elevated in a pattern she recognized from every captured predator she had ever studied. The flat, high plateau of an animal that has decided it is going to have to fight its way out eventually and is conserving itself for it. On the morning the human first sat down with her breakfast, the plateau had not dropped. It had held all through the 11 minutes. It had begun to drop only in the last moments, when the animal crossed the yard and lay down at the mesh and put its head on its paws. And it had dropped then, not slowly, the way stress unwinds, but all at once, the way a held breath goes. The animal had made a decision. Mayhew had the graph of the exact second it made it. It chose her, she told Asefal, the legal adjunct who had taken to visiting the wing because he found the whole affair delicious. Not the food. We offered it food for 9 days and the cortisol never moved. It chose her asterisk. The porridge is a formality. It is Asefal, I do not have a clean word. In my field we would say it has pair bonded, but that word is for mates and offspring, and it is not either of those things to her. It has adopted a keeper, a companion. It has looked at an entire academy of trained predators and rejected all of us and chosen the one small unarmed creature who was not afraid, and it has decided that she is its person, and I do not think anything short of killing it will change its mind, and I have begun to suspect that killing it is not on the menu. Why not? Asefal asked, delighted. Because, Mayhew said, of the drone. The drone had been Sale's, and it had happened on the 6th morning, and Sale had not authorized it, which was the part that mattered. A junior security officer named Threll, young, ambitious, one of the provost's proteges, had watched 6 days of the human sitting unharmed in the corridor, and had reached the ambitious young officer's conclusion, which was that the animal was tamer than everyone claimed, and that a capable officer could demonstrate control of the situation and be noticed for it. He had run a light survey drone into the yard during the breakfast hour, on manual, low and slow, to demonstrate that the containment wing could operate normally around the docile specimen. The animal had been lying at the mesh, head near Wren's hip, breathing its low-content thrum, half asleep. It did not startle. It did not roar. Mayhew had the footage frame by frame, and there was never a moment of alarm in the animal at all. What there was, instead, was the exact instant the tiger's eyes opened, not toward the drone, but toward the human. It looked at Wren first. It read her. And Wren, who had heard the drone's ducted whine and gone still, made the mistake of tensing, one small involuntary tightening of the shoulders, the body's honest report that something in the room was wrong. The animal was up, before the tension finished crossing her shoulders. It did not go for the drone. That was the thing Mayhew could not stop describing to people who had not seen it. A mid-tier predator goes for the moving thing. The deathworld apex went for the asterisk geometry. It came off the floor and put its whole striped bulk between the human and the drone, between her and the thing that had made her afraid, and it stood there, 400 kilos of it, shoulders higher than the mesh, and it looked at the drone, and it did not make a sound, and the drone's operator, 2 levels up and safe behind glass, aborted the flight so hard he crashed the unit into the yard's far wall. Later, asked why, Officer Threll could not construct an account. He said the animal had not threatened him. He said it had done nothing. He said that he had looked at the video feed of the animal looking at his drone, and that some part of him older than his rank had informed the rest of him, with total authority and no appeal, that the flight was over. He requested reassignment out of the containment wing that afternoon. Sale granted it without comment, which for Sale was a scream. That, Mayhew told Asefal, is why killing it is not on the menu. Provost Sale watched a docile animal put itself between a threat and its chosen human faster than the human could finish being afraid. He is not a stupid person. He understands what that behavior costs to attempt, and he has stopped attempting it, and he has not told anyone he has stopped, because the last thing a warden provost can afford to be seen doing is deciding that a hazard has beaten him. So he is doing the second thing. He is trying to make the hazard someone else's. Whose? He has sent, Mayhew said, for the Kevani. The Kevani arrived on the 11th day, and they brought the Skarn, and for a little while it looked as though Sale had found his answer. The Kevani were the Concord's beast handlers, had been for 400 cycles, a lean gray pack social people who had domesticated their own homeworld's apex lined the slow, bloody way, and now hired the results out across the sector, as the closest thing the civilized worlds had to a war animal. A Skarn stood as high at the shoulder as a Thren, ran down anything on legs, and had, in 400 cycles of selective breeding, been shaped into the single most reliable instrument of controlled violence the Concord's Beast Corps possessed. It obeyed one handler. It feared nothing that walked. It had ended standoffs on 9 worlds simply by being walked into the room. The handler's name was Oswick, and he was old in the Kevani way, his gray gone nearly white at the muzzle, and he had handled Skarn for 30 cycles and buried 2 of them, and he did not. He told Sale at the gallery rail, think much of the assignment. You want me to walk my animal into a room with a deathworld apex, Oswick said, so that my animal establishes dominance and the deathworld apex accepts a place beneath it, and then you have a controlled animal instead of a free one. That is the plan. That is the plan, Sale said. Oswick looked down into the yard for a long moment. The tiger was on its sun shelf. It had watched the Kevani come into the gallery, and it was watching them still, its head up, its eyes moving from face to face with the slow attention of something taking inventory. And when its eyes reached the Skarn at Oswick's side, they stopped. The Skarn had gone very quiet. Provost, Oswick said slowly, how much do you know about how dominance works among apex animals? Enough. You know nothing, Oswick said without heat, or you would not have sent for me. Dominance is not decided in the fight. By the time there is a fight, the dominance is already lost by whoever started it. Dominance is decided before. In the reading, 2 apexes measure each other and one of them yields, and the whole point of 30 cycles of breeding a Skarn is that the Skarn has been made so that it does not yield, so that the reading always comes back I do not yield and the other animal is the one who steps down. He nodded at the yard. My animal has been reading that one since we walked in. Look at it. Look at where its weight is. Mayhew looked. The Skarn, the war animal, the thing that had cowed 9 worlds, had settled its weight back onto its haunches. Its head had lowered. Its ears had gone flat and soft, not the pinned flat of aggression but the sunk flat of deference, and it had angled its body a few degrees away from the glass, so that it was not squared to the tiger, so that it was not offering a challenge, and a low sound was coming out of it that Oswick's handlers knew and did not like. It's asking permission, Oswick said quietly, to leave. That one, the tiger, hasn't done anything, hasn't stood, hasn't shown a tooth. It's just reading my animal back, and my animal has already run the numbers, and the numbers say step down. 30 cycles I've handled Skarn. I have never once seen one offer deference to something it hasn't fought. Not once. He turned to Sale, and there was something in his gray face that Mayhew would later decide was the closest a Kevani came to reverence. You do not have a hazard, Provost. You have a senior. Every animal in this ring is going to read it as senior the second it's in the room, because that's what it is, the top of a food chain that had to climb higher than any of ours to get there, because everything on its world was trying to kill it the whole way up. My Skarn knows. It knew before I did. If I walk it in there, it will not fight. It will lie down. And then I will have a very expensive war animal that has decided it works for your specimen now, and I will have to explain that to the Beast Corps. So you refuse the assignment? I refuse to embarrass my animal, Oswick said. There's a difference. It's already yielded from behind the glass. Making it do it in person would just be cruel. He was turning to go when the tiger in the yard did the thing that Mayhew put at the very top of her report and defended to 4 review boards over the following month. It rose. It crossed the yard, not toward the mesh where the human sat at breakfast, because it was not the breakfast hour and the human was not there, toward the near wall, under the gallery, under the place where the scarn stood trembling at the rail. And it looked up at the scarn, the alien war animal, the cowed apex of another world, and it lay down, deliberately, in full view on its side. And it exposed its belly to the daylight and let its enormous head roll back. And it did the single most dangerous thing an apex predator can do in front of another apex predator, which is to make itself completely defenseless, on purpose first. The scarn's whole body changed, the trembling stopped, its ears came up. The deferent sound died in its throat and became, instead, a low answering rumble, and it lowered itself at the rail into a mirror of the posture below. And the 2 animals, the Earth apex and the Concord's finest war beast, separated by a level of decking and 40 centimeters of glass, lay belly up to each other in the daylight like 2 old soldiers who had just agreed there was nothing left to prove. "Oh," said Oswick very softly. "What did it just do?" Sale demanded. "Explain what it just did." Oswick did not answer for a moment. When he did, his voice had changed. "It told my animal to stand down," he said. "Not by winning. By showing it there was no fight to have. It made itself safe first so my animal wouldn't have to be afraid of being the one who yielded. That is," he stopped. "Provost, in 30 cycles I have never seen an apex do a kindness. That was a kindness. To a stranger's animal through a wall for no reason but that the stranger's animal was frightened and it could see that and it decided to fix it." He looked at Mayhew. "You, the scientist, you've been watching that thing for 11 days. Is it always like this?" "The human calls it gentle," Mayhew said. "I have been arguing for 11 days that gentle is the wrong word for an apex predator, and I have been wrong for 11 days. Yes, it is always like this. It is the most dangerous thing I have ever stood near, and it has spent every day of its captivity looking for someone to be kind to." Oswick was quiet. Then he did a thing that went into no report, that Sale pretended not to see, that Mayhew recorded and kept for herself. The old Kevani beast handler put his hand flat on the gallery glass, over the yard, over the animal below, in the gesture his people used at the grave of a scarn they had loved, and he held it there a moment, and then he collected his war animal which came away from the rail reluctantly, looking back, and he left the Ashran ring on the next transit, and he filed no invoice. And in the space on the Beast Corps form where a handler recorded the outcome of an engagement he wrote a single word in the trade cant, which the clerk had to look up, and which meant, in the old Kevani sense used only of a pack elder, withdrawn. In respect. Sale called the second hearing that evening. He had lost the drone. He had lost the scarn. He had, Mayhew understood, lost the entire category of solution. He understood the application of a superior force, because he had now watched the animal defeat superior force twice without lifting a paw, once by standing and once by lying down, and a person cannot plan against a thing that wins by lying down. So he did the thing that frightened people do when force fails them. He reached for the rules. "The specimen," he told the board, "is clearly of significant behavioral interest. I no longer seek its disposal." He said it flatly, and it cost him, and everyone at the table knew the drone and the scarn were the reason and no one said so. "I seek its transfer. This is a combined military academy. We train cadets for the fleet. We are not a menagerie and we are not equipped to house an apex-class deathworld carnivore indefinitely, and the human cadet's arrangement with the animal however remarkable, is not a training program. It is a hobby. I move that the specimen be transferred to a properly equipped conquered xenofauna facility, and that Cadet Halloran, whose responsibilities are to her cohort and not to an animal, be relieved of it. It was a good motion. It was reasonable. It would have passed, and it would have put the tiger in a proper facility 19 days away with proper keepers and a proper enclosure, and no small tired human who ate her breakfast against the mesh. And the animal that had spent 9 days waiting for someone not to be afraid of it would go back to waiting in a better box forever. Mayhew was drafting her objection when the door opened, and Cadet Ren Halloran came in without being summoned, still in her cohort fatigues, with a data slate under her arm, and the flat, unbothered look Mayhew had come to understand meant the human had already decided how something was going to go and was simply here to inform the room. "Sorry I'm late," Ren said, to a hearing she had not been invited to. "I heard you were going to ship him 19 days across the sector in a box. I brought some reading." She set the slate on the table. "You're going to want to hear about the last time somebody moved a bonded apex away from its person. It's a short story. Nobody in it has a good time." The short story on Ren Halloran's slate was not, in fact, a story. It was a veterinary case history from a wildlife facility on Earth, translated rough by the cadet's own hand into trade cant, and it concerned an animal, not a tiger. A smaller cat, the file said, but the same family, the same wiring that had bonded to a single keeper and then been moved, for its own good, to a superior enclosure 2,000 kilometers away with superior keepers and superior care. The animal had stopped eating. Not dramatically. It had simply, over 11 days, declined food in a descending curve that the facility's staff had charted and could not reverse, because there was nothing wrong with the food, and nothing wrong with the enclosure, and nothing wrong with the animal that a scanner could find. What was wrong was that the one creature it had decided to trust was 2,000 kilometers away, and the animal had no framework for 2,000 kilometers, and so it had reached the only conclusion its wiring allowed, which was that the trust had been a mistake, and that it would not be making that mistake again, and that there was, therefore, no particular reason to continue. They had flown the keeper in on the 12th day. The animal had lived. The file did not say for how long afterward it would let anyone else near it, because the answer was never. "That's the risk," Ren said into the silence of the board. "You move him 19 days out to your very good facility with your very good keepers, and you'll have done everything right, and he'll die anyway, because the only thing wrong with him will be that I'm not there, and none of your instruments will be able to see it because it isn't in his blood. It's in his." She paused, looking for the word in a language that did not have it, and settled for the human one, his heart. He waited 9 days in that box for one person to walk in and not be scared of him. He is not going to survive you taking that person away and telling him it was for his own good. He'll just decide he was wrong to have hoped, and a tiger who's decided that is not a tiger anybody wants to keep alive, because at that point the gentleness is the first thing to go. Provost Sale's dorsal plates had come down during this, a fraction without his seeming to notice. "You are describing," he said, "a sentimental attachment. I am running a military academy. I cannot set policy around an animal's feelings." "You set policy around your cadets' feelings every day," Ren said. "You call it morale. You've got a whole officer for it." A ripple went around the Thren side of the table. It was true, and no one enjoyed hearing a first-year say it. "I'm not asking you to keep him because it's sad. I'm telling you the transfer has a failure mode you haven't modeled, and the failure mode is a dead deathworld apex and a diplomatic incident, because my government is going to ask why the only Earth animal in conquered custody died in your care 11 days after you took it off its accredited representative schedule. And I am the accredited representative, and I am going to have to tell them the truth, which is that you did it to tidy up your training wing." She said all of it in the same flat voice, without heat, without triumph, the way she ate her breakfast, as if it were simply the information in the room and someone had to say it and it might as well be her. Mayhew watched the board absorb it and understood, watching, that the human had done to the hearing exactly what she did to the tiger every morning. She had walked into a room full of frightened predators and declined, loudly, with her whole body, to be afraid, and the room had read the calm and slowed its own heart to match it. "What do you propose?" Asifal the legal adjunct asked, delighted again before Sale could rally. "Keep him here. Give him the wing. You're not using it for anything else. Everybody's too scared to train in it. Put him on my record as a I don't care what you call it, an independent study, a xenofauna practicum. Assign adjunct Mayhew as supervisor. She's already doing the work. And let me keep having my breakfast." Ren shrugged, one small human motion. "That's the whole proposal. It costs you a training wing you weren't using and a supervisor who's already assigned. And in exchange, you get the only living deathworld apex in the conquered, calm, fed, and studied, instead of a dead one and a note in your file. I'd take that trade. I'd take it fast, actually, before my government finishes reading the incident summary and starts asking who authorized the drone." The room went very still. Sale had not authorized the drone. Everyone at the table knew he had not authorized the drone. But the drone had flown under his wing, on his watch, and if Earth's accredited representative chose to be curious about the chain of command that had put a survey unit into a corridor 12 meters from her while she ate, Mayhew watched the calculation move behind the provost's ancient eyes and watched it arrive where the human had already parked it. "The independent study," Sale said at last, each word set down like a stone he resented, "is approved on a provisional basis. Adjunct Mayhew supervising, reviewed each quarter. The animal does not leave the wing. If it harms a cadet, the provisional basis ends that hour." He rose, plates locked, dignity gathered around him like a robe. "And Cadet, the next time you wish to address this board, you will be summoned to it." "Sure," Ren said, already gathering her slate. "Thanks, he eats at the 6th hour. You're all welcome to watch. Bring your own breakfast, he doesn't share." The thing the reports never quite captured, Mayhew tried and failed in 4 successive drafts, was how ordinary the human was. That was the whole engine of it, and it defeated every attempt to write it down, because the natural instinct of a report was to make the remarkable thing remarkable, and the remarkable thing about Ren Halloran was that there was nothing remarkable about her at all. She was small even for a human, which made her very small indeed among the Thren. Her face was plain and even and forgettable. Mayhew, who had a scientist's memory for markings, had trouble describing her to people who had not met her, and always ended up describing the tiger instead. She wore her fatigues until they were worn. She was not the top of her cohort or the bottom of it. She had no special rank, no combat record, no lineage anyone had heard of. When she was not with the animal, she was unremarkable in classes, competent and quiet. The kind of cadet an instructor forgets is present until the marks come in and are fine. And every morning she walked into a room with the most dangerous animal in the Concord and had her breakfast. And the animal loved her, and no one could work out why it was her and not one of the trained handlers. And the answer, Mayhew became more certain of it every day, was that it was her because she was ordinary, because she did not perform. The handlers had come to the animal with technique, with protocol, with the whole apparatus of controlling a beast, and the animal had read all of it as noise, as the fussing of frightened creatures who needed something from it. And the human had come with none of it. She had come with a bowl of porridge and a bad night's sleep, and a completely genuine, entirely unforced indifference to whether the animal was impressed by her, and to a thing that had spent its whole captive life being handled. An ordinary person who wanted nothing from it was the most extraordinary thing in the world. Mayhew learned the human's history slowly, in pieces, across the breakfast hours, because Ren did not volunteer it and Mayhew had learned not to push. She had grown up, it turned out, in a cold place, one of Earth's high northern reaches, where the winters were long enough to kill and the same species of cat, wild, still walked the forests. Her family had run a sanctuary. Not a zoo, she was careful about the word. A place where animals that could not go back to the wild and could not stay in the world went to be safe, and most of them, she said, were there because a human had done something stupid to them first. She had grown up feeding cats bigger than herself. She had learned the breathing from her grandmother, who had learned it from hers. She had learned, she said before she learned to read, the single rule that the whole sanctuary ran on, and that the entire Ashran Academy had failed to grasp in 9 days of protocol. You cannot make a predator trust you, and you cannot make it obey you. And if you try either one, it will know, and the only thing you can do is be honest and be calm and be there tomorrow and let it decide. That's it, she told Mayhew one morning, the tiger's head near her hip and its breath stirring her sleeve. That's the whole thing. You can't fake it because they can smell your heart rate, and you can't rush it because trust that gets rushed isn't trust, it's just fear wearing a costume. You just show up. Same time, same calm, same food. Every day whether he's ready or not until one day he is. My grandmother used to say the animal isn't learning to trust you. It's learning that you're reliable. Those aren't the same thing. Trust is a feeling. Reliable is a fact. You build the fact and the feeling comes to live in it. Mayhew wrote that down. It ended up, eventually, in a paper that changed her field, under the human's name and hers, and the line the whole paper turned on was that one: trust is a feeling, reliable is a fact. You build the fact and the feeling comes to live in it, which a 20-year-old had said around a mouthful of porridge, and which the Concord's entire discipline of applied xenopsychology had somehow spent 400 cycles not managing to notice. The scent problem was the part the Thren could not get past, and it was the part that changed the academy. The Thren navigated the world by rank, and rank to a Thren was not an idea but a smell. Every Thren carried a scent signature that broadcast where they stood: seniority, health, confidence, the whole social position rendered in a chemistry that other Thren read without thinking, the way Mayhew's people read color. It was why the Thren ran the academy. Their entire civilization was a hierarchy so precise and so instantly legible that command came naturally to them. And a Thren walking into any room knew within a breath exactly who outranked whom and slotted in accordingly. And this had made them superb officers and had made their society stable for longer than the Psalmody had had writing. And the tiger broke it. The tiger read to a Thren's sense as the top of every scale at once. Not aggressively, that was the maddening part. An aggressive signature they could have understood and answered. The animal simply smelled to a Thren like the most senior thing in any room it was in, calmly and without emphasis, the way a mountain is tall without trying. And a Thren's deepest wiring, the part under the language, could not stand in a room with a thing that outranked it on every axis and not respond. And the response their biology produced, the plates going high, the valves closing, the whole body bracing, was the same response their biology produced in the presence of an unquestioned superior, which is to say the Thren were not afraid of the tiger. It was worse than that. Their bodies wanted to obey it. That is why the keepers broke, Mayhew explained to Asafel, who had asked, as everyone eventually asked, why a species of civilized predators could not manage one animal. It was not fear. Fear they are trained for. It was their instinct told them, over and over all day, that they were in the presence of a commander they had not been introduced to and had failed to salute. You cannot work under that. It is not the animal that exhausted them. It is their own biology, insisting, every second, that they were being insubordinate to a superior who had not yet given an order. 9 days of that would break anyone. The human doesn't have it. Humans don't have the centrank sense at all. They're nearly nose-blind by our standards, which we always thought was a deficiency. It turns out it's why she can sit next to it and eat. She literally cannot smell that it outranks her. So she treats it as an equal, which is the one thing no Thren is able to do, and the animal, Asafel, I think the animal has been starved for an equal its whole life. I think it is the loneliest thing in the Concord. I think it spent 9 days waiting for someone who couldn't smell how big it was." Asefel was quiet for a while. He was old for a psalmody, and he had seen a great deal. "You are going to have to be careful," he said finally, "how you write that, because what you are describing is not a hazard and it is not a study animal. What you are describing is a person. And the moment the Concord agrees that it is a person, every polity that has ever kept a beast is going to have a very bad morning." "I know," Mayhew said. "I have been having that bad morning for 2 weeks. I keep hoping I'm wrong." "Are you?" She thought about the scarn belly up at the rail. She thought about the drone and the geometry and the animal that had gone for the angle instead of the target. She thought about the graph with the exact second on it. "No," she said, "I don't think I am." The cadets did not care about any of it. The cadets came to watch a girl eat breakfast with a tiger, and stayed, and something happened to them while they watched that no one had planned and no one could have. They stopped being afraid. Not all at once, and not of the tiger of the wing. For 11 days the containment wing had been the place at the far end of the academy that everyone rooted around, the corridor you did not walk if you could walk another, the low thrum under the floor that meant stay away. And then a small human started eating breakfast there every morning, calmly, in full view, and the cadets came to watch because horror is interesting, and they kept coming because it turned out to be the opposite of horror. It turned out to be the most peaceful 11 minutes on the ring. 40 young predators of 6 species standing in a gallery in the morning light, quiet, watching an ordinary girl and an enormous calm animal share a silence, and going away, every one of them, a little slower in the chest than they had come. A Thren third year started bringing her own breakfast to the gallery and eating it while she watched, in unconscious sympathy, and then 2 more did. And then it was a thing, the morning ration, taken standing at the containment rail in the presence of the animal. And the cadets did not have a name for why they did it, but they did it. And Mayhew, watching the sensors, watched the whole gallery's stress chemistry drop during the breakfast hour the way the tigers had dropped the first morning, all at once. A held breath going out of 40 young soldiers at the sight of one small creature being unafraid. She flagged it in her notes and did not know yet what it meant. She would find out. Everyone would. Because Provost Sale was watching the gallery too, from his office feed, watching 40 cadets and 6 species stand quiet and calm and unified in the presence of an animal he had twice tried to remove. And Warden Provost Sale had run the Ashran Academy for 11 cycles on the principle that order came from the top down, from rank and protocol and a clear chain of command. And he was looking at 40 cadets who had found an order he had not issued, around a thing he did not control. And it did not make him wiser. It made him afraid, and a frightened provost, Mayhew was about to learn, was far more dangerous than any tiger. The health assessment could not be skipped, and Mayhew was the one who had to tell the humans so. Concord custody, law required it. Any animal held on a Concord installation past a certain span had to be assessed by a licensed xenoveterinary officer, weighed, scanned, its vitals logged, its condition documented, and the span had come due, and the wing could not simply decline, because the same law that protected the animal from a quiet dose at the 5th hour also required, unsentimentally, that someone with the proper letters put hands near it and confirm it was not suffering. There was no exemption for the fact that no licensed xenovet in the sector had ever put hands on a deathworld apex, or wanted to. The officer they sent was named Duville, a soft-shelled psalmody of Mayhew's own species, competent and thorough, and when he arrived at the gallery rail and looked down into the yard, the precise color of a person whose professional training and animal instincts had begun arguing and were not going to stop. He had brought a full field kit and a sedation rig and a written protocol, and he set the protocol on the rail, and Wren looked at it, and Wren said the thing she said to every protocol. "No," she said, "not the sedation. You dose him and the whole 3 weeks resets because he wakes up groggy in a room where somebody did something to him he didn't agree to, and everything I've built runs backward. And you don't need it. I'll show you." She looked at the frightened vet. "You want to weigh him, scan him, check his teeth, his coat, his eyes, his joints. Listen to his chest. Yes, all the boring things." "All the boring things," Duval managed. "Do them with me. He'll let you if you're calm and you're honest and you don't rush, and if you go through me. I'm the thing he trusts. You're not yet, so you don't approach him. You approach *me, and you do everything an arm's length from me, and he reads that I'm fine with you, and being fine with you becomes a thing he does because I do it. That's how it works with the young ones at the sanctuary and the vet visits. The animal doesn't trust the vet. The animal trusts the person who trusts the vet. You borrow my trust. Come down, leave the rig." Duval came down. Mayhew watched him do it, watched a licensed officer of her own careful species walk into a yard with a 400-kilo apex predator, and no sedation and no barrier, on the word of a 20-year-old, and she understood that the human had done to him in 5 minutes what she did to everyone. She had been so completely unafraid that the fear had nowhere to stand. It took an hour. Ren narrated the whole of it in the flat, low voice, not to the vet, to the animal, a running quiet commentary that Mayhew realized was not information. The tiger understood none of the words, but rhythm, the asterisk calm rhythm, asterisk a steady human voice going on and on about nothing while a stranger's hands did unfamiliar things nearby, the audible proof that there was no emergency. Duval scanned along the animal's flank with Ren's hand resting on the same flank. He checked the great gray head's eyes with Ren's fingers already there. When he needed to look at the teeth, the part he had dreaded, the part his every instinct screamed against, Ren simply put her own hand flat against the side of the enormous jaw and kept talking. And the animal, reading her, let its mouth ease, and the vet did his work an arm's length from a set of teeth that could have closed the question of his career in a quarter second. And the animal held perfectly still, bored, half asleep, its eyes on the human the entire time, checking her, only her, for any sign that the boring thing happening to it was a thing to worry about, and finding none, because she gave it none. When it was done, Duval sat back on the yard floor, and his color had gone through fear and out the other side into something Mayhew recognized, because she had gone through the same door herself, weeks before. "He's healthy," Duval said, a little unsteadily, reading his own logs as though they belonged to someone else. "Extraordinarily. Underweight when he arrived, per the intake, he's recovered that. Coat's good. Joints are good for his age. His heart rate through the whole assessment barely moved. I have done this to frightened housecats who spiked higher than he did with my hands in his mouth." He looked at the animal, and then at the human, and then he said the thing that Mayhew logged, because they all said a version of it and she had started keeping them. "I came down here certain I was going to be the vet who got hurt, and the whole time he wasn't watching my hands. He was watching your face. He didn't care what I was doing. He only cared whether you were worried about it. I have never," he stopped. "I have assessed animals my whole career. I have never once been in the presence of one that outsourced its fear to a person. That's not a beast's behavior. A beast keeps its own fear. It has to. That's what keeps it alive." He gathered his kit slowly. "He gave you his. He handed you the job of being afraid for him, so he wouldn't have to be, and you took it. I'm going to have to think about that for a while." "Take your time," Ren said, her hand slow on the gray flank. "I did." She looked down at the animal, at the enormous head easing back toward her lap, at the yellow eyes going to half-closed now that the boring hour was over and the reliable person had, as always, turned out to be right that there was nothing to fear. "It's the best thing anybody's ever handed me, if you want to know. His fear. He doesn't give it to just anyone. He waited 9 days in a box to find somebody safe enough to hand it to." She was quiet a moment. "Log him healthy. And put in your report that he didn't need the sedation, so the next officer doesn't bring a rig either. That's the only thing I'll ask you. Don't let them dose him for being calm. That's backwards. That's the whole thing everybody keeps getting backwards." Duval put it in his report. He put a great deal more in his report than the health assessment required. And his report, like the recording and the graphs in the contractor's testimony, became one more piece of the slow avalanche of documentation that would, in the end, be too heavy for any frightened provost or austere assessor to shovel aside. The growing, unanswerable, meticulously logged record of a thing the conquered had no category for, and was going to have to build one for, one honest witness at a time. The animal got its name on an ordinary morning, 3 weeks in, and Mayhew was there for it and put it in no report because it was not the kind of thing a report had a field for. Wren had finished her porridge. The tiger lay along the mesh with its head near her hip, and she had her hand up flat against the wire, not through it. She had never once put a hand through the mesh, and Mayhew had come to understand that the restraint was itself part of the honesty, that the human would not offer the animal a thing the mesh made safe, would not perform a closeness the barrier faked, and the animal had its cheek against the wire on its side, pressing into the flat of her hand through the wire the way the great cats did, its eyes closed, its breath going slow. "You need a name," Wren told it. "I've been calling you for 3 weeks." My grandmother would have had something to say about that. She looked at the coat, the winter gray washed through the orange along its flanks and its heavy ruff, the color of wood smoke and old snow. "Ash," she said, trying it. "That gray, like a fire that's been out a while but the ground still warm." The tiger's ear turned toward the sound of her voice. "Ash, that's you, all right." That was all. She did not make a ceremony of it. But Mayhew noticed that from that morning the animal came to the name. Not the way a trained beast comes to a command, but the way anyone comes to their name. A small turn of attention, a settling, and Mayhew, who had spent her career insisting on the correct taxonomic distance between an animal and a person, found that she had, without deciding to, started calling it Ash in her notes, and then in her speech, and then to the board, and no one had corrected her, and the not correcting was, she thought. The moment the whole academy quietly changed its mind about what the thing in the wing was, whether or not it admitted it. Ash, the academy's terror, the board's hazard, a frightened old provost's problem. Named on an ordinary morning, for the gray in his coat, by a girl with a bowl of porridge, and gentled by nothing but 3 weeks of someone showing up. It should have been the end of the trouble. It was the middle of it. Mayhew found the requisition by accident, which was the only way she was ever going to find it, because it had not gone through the containment wing system at all. It had gone through facilities. A cadet in the logistics practicum, doing an inventory audit as a class exercise, had flagged an anomaly to Mayhew because Mayhew supervised the wing and the anomaly touched the wing. A contract had been let quietly to an external firm for what the paperwork called specimen transfer preparation, scheduled for the 5th hour of the following morning, 1 hour before the 6th, 1 hour before breakfast, and the firm was not a xenofauna transfer service. Mayhew knew the firm. Every xenobiologist knew the firm. It was a sanitation contractor. It disposed of hazardous biologicals. It had one relevant capability, and the capability was a dosing lance calibrated for euthanasia of large animals, and it had been booked off the wing's books, through facilities, for the hour before the human arrived. Mayhew sat with it for a long moment, and understood the whole shape of it at once, the way she had understood the tiger. Sale had lost the hearing. He could not transfer the animal. The human had made the transfer a diplomatic risk and a documented failure mode. He could not dispose of it openly. The board had voted the disposal down. So he had stopped trying to win through the rules and gone under them. A quiet contract, a euphemism, a dawn appointment, the deed done and the animal cold before Earth's accredited representative came down with her breakfast and found an empty yard and a facilities note about a transfer that had, regrettably, gone wrong. It was clean. It was deniable. By the time anyone traced the contract, it would be a facilities error, an overzealous contractor, a tragic accident with a dangerous animal, and Warden Provost Sale's 11-cycle record and his frightened old certainty about order would both be safe. It would also, Mayhew knew, kill Ren Halloran in every way that was not literal, and there was a version of the following morning where it killed her in the literal way too, because the human was not going to walk into an empty yard and accept a facility's note. The human was going to find out, and the human was going to come down early, and the human was going to put her small, ordinary body between a euthanasia contractor and the only equal a lonely apex predator had ever found, and Mayhew did not know what happened then, and did not want to. She had until the 5th hour. She spent none of it going to the board because the board met on a 2-day cycle and the contract was in 9 hours, and she spent none of it going to Sale because Sale was the contract. She spent it going to Ren. Ren read the requisition twice. Her face did not change, which Mayhew had learned meant it was very bad. 5th hour, Ren said. An hour before I come down. Yes. So I'm not supposed to be there. She set the slate down. He planned it around my schedule. He knows Ash eats when I eat. He knows the wing's empty at the 5th hour because everyone comes for the 6th. He's going to do it in the 1 hour of the day nobody's watching because I made everybody watch, and the one thing I didn't do is watch the hour before. She was quiet. That's actually good work. If he weren't using it to kill she stopped and chose a word. And the word she chose was not animal and not specimen. To kill my friend, I'd tell him it was good work. Cadet Ren. What do you want to do? I want to be there at the 5th hour, Ren said. And I want you to not be, and I want no marksman, and I want the wings inner mesh open. Mayhew's whole body went cold. No. Listen to me. You want to open the mesh between you and an apex predator while a contractor comes in to kill it. Ren, if it goes wrong. It's not going to go wrong for me, Ren said, and she said it with such flat certainty that Mayhew stopped. It's going to go wrong for the contractor, and I need you to hear what I'm actually saying because I need one honest person to know what happened in that room, and I've decided it's you. I am not going to be in danger from Ash tomorrow. I have never once been in danger from Ash. The mesh has never been for me. Do you understand? 3 weeks I've sat behind it and I've never put my hand through it, and everybody thinks that's because I don't trust him yet, and it's the opposite. The mesh isn't there so he can't reach me. The mesh is there so your people feel safe enough to let me keep coming. It's for you. It was always for you. She met Mayhew's eyes. Tomorrow, I don't need your people to feel safe. I need Ash to understand that the man coming through that door at the 5th hour is a threat to me. And the only way he understands that fast enough is if there's nothing between us. So the mesh comes open. And then I have my breakfast an hour early. And we see what the contractor decides to do when he walks in and finds Earth's accredited representative sitting inside the enclosure with the animal he was paid to put down, and no barrier and no marksman, and a live comm feed to my government that I turned on myself. The comm feed, Mayhew said slowly. He can't kill Ash with a witness, Ren said. That's the whole plan. Sale's whole plan needs it to be quiet, a facility's error, a sad accident, nobody in the room. So I put somebody in the room, me, live on the record to Earth. The contractor walks in and the choice isn't dose the animal. The choice is commit a filmed atrocity on a foreign national and her diplomatically protected companion in front of her government. No contractor takes that job. He'll abort. And then I've got 9 hours of Sale's contract and a live recording of a euthanasia lance walking into the wing an hour early, and then I go to the board, and Sale doesn't run this academy anymore. She picked the slate back up. I don't need Ash to fight anybody, Mayhew. I need him calm, and I need him next to me, and I need it to be very obvious that hurting him means going through me on camera. That's it. The calmest thing in that room tomorrow is going to be the tiger, and it's going to be the most frightening thing in the room because it's calm, and the contractor is going to feel it in the part of him that's older than his contract, and he's going to leave. Predators can smell a lie. They can also smell a bluff. I'm not bluffing. That's why it works. Mayhu looked at the human for a long time. Then she said the only true thing she had. Your grandmother, she said, taught you a great deal. She taught me the animals, Ren said. The people I've figured out myself. They're easier. They lie worse. Mayhu was not there at the 5th hour, because Ren had asked her not to be, and because one honest witness who could later swear she had been kept clear was worth more than a second body in the room. But she was in the observation gallery, alone in the dark before the daylight panels came up, with the wings full sensor suite live and recording to 3 places Sale could not reach, and she watched the whole thing on the feeds, and the account she gave afterward to the board, to Earth's belatedly furious liaison office, to the review, was the same account every time because it was what happened. At the 5th hour in the gray pre-dawn of the panels, Cadet Ren Halloran sat inside the enclosure, on the yard floor with her breakfast tray in her lap and the inner mesh drawn back and folded, and the tiger lay against her, its head in her lap, its enormous body curled around her small one like a wall that breathed. She was eating her porridge. She had a calm bead live at her collar, its light steady, transmitting. She was not hidden and she was not hiding. She had put the two of them in the exact center of the yard, in the open, in the coming light, where anyone walking in would see them first thing and could not pretend later they had not. At the 5th hour and a quarter, the door to the feeding corridor cycled, and the contractor came in. He was a lean-scaled thing in a sanitation firm's gray coverall, and he carried the lance slung low and easy the way a professional carries the tool of a job he has done many times, and he was 3 steps into the corridor before he understood what he was looking at. And Mayhu watched, on the feed, the exact moment the job he had been hired for stopped existing. Because the yard was not empty, the animal was not sedated in a transfer crate. There was a young human sitting in the open with a bowl of grain, and there was an apex predator curled around her, awake, its head coming up now, slow, off the human's lap, turning toward the door, and it did not rise, and it did not snarl, and it did not do a single thing that the contractor's training had a countermeasure for. It simply looked at him. It looked at the man who had come into its home at dawn with a killing tool, and it kept its body curved around the small creature in its lap, and it looked at him with the flat yellow patience of a thing that had already measured the room and found the exits and knew where every living thing in it stood, and it made, very low, so low the bead barely caught it, a sound that was not the content thrum and was not a growl, that had no translation, that every creature who later heard the recording understood without one. The human did not stop eating. That was the detail that broke the contractor. Mayhu watched it break him. He stood in the corridor with a euthanasia lance and a cancelled job, and a live calm light he had not been told about, and in front of him a small human ate her breakfast, unhurried, unbothered, without so much as glancing at the professional who had come to kill her friend, as if he were not worth the interruption, as if the outcome were so thoroughly decided that his presence was merely a thing to be waited out, like weather. And around her, an animal that could have closed the distance in a second and a half held perfectly, dangerously still, and looked at him, and did not blink. Ren spoke once, without turning around a mouthful of porridge in the flat bored voice, to the man behind her. "He's calm," she said. "That's the part you want to think about. He's not scared and he's not angry. He's just decided how this goes. So there's a live feed on my collar going to Earth, and it's got your coverall and your lance and the time, and in about a minute it's going to have you leaving. That's the whole rest of your morning. You leave, and this is a scheduling error nobody prosecutes. You take one more step and it's the last thing a lot of people ever watch you do, and I don't mean him." A pause, a slow spoonful. "I said he's calm. I didn't say I was." "Leave the lance." The contractor left the lance. He set it on the corridor floor. The sensors caught the exact clatter of it, and he backed out of the wing without ever turning his exposed back to the animal, which was, Mayhu noted in her report, the single most professional thing he did all morning and the only instinct that had served him, and the door cycled shut behind him, And inside the yard the tiger lowered its head back into the human's lap, and its breath went out in the low-content thrum. And Ren Halloran finished her breakfast in the coming daylight with 400 kilos of gentled apex predator curled around her, and a euthanasia lance lying abandoned 12 meters away. And she reached down, at last, and put her hand flat on the great gray and orange head in her lap. The first time in 3 weeks there had been no mesh between them, and she said, quietly, to the animal and the live feed and the empty wing, and the frightened old man watching from his office who did not yet know he had lost. "Good boy, Ash, eat your breakfast." The recording did not stay on the ring this time. Ren had transmitted it live to Earth through the accredited channel, and by the time the Ashran board convened its emergency session, the file had been played in a briefing room on Earth's own moon, and Earth's liaison office, which had spent 11 months being ignored by a Concord that regarded the newest signatory as a curiosity, had discovered all at once that it had teeth and had bitten down. The board did not vote on Warden Provost Sale. It did not have to. Mayhew sat at the same table she had sat at for the disposition hearing, and watched the same senior Thren who had once voted to destroy the animal now sit with their dorsal plates low and folded, the posture their species reserved for a superior's judgment, and understood that the animal had not needed to win the room. The human had. The human had put a euthanasia contractor and a live comm feed in the same 9 hours, and let the board watch itself be shown, in daylight, exactly what it had let its provost become, and there was no plate high enough to stand in front of that. Sales spoke once. He did not defend the contract. He was too old and too proud to lie to a room that had the recording, and Mayhew gave him that much. He did not pretend. "I have run this academy for 11 cycles," he said, "on the belief that order flows from command, and that a thing which cannot be commanded cannot be permitted, because it is the seed of every disorder that has ever killed cadets under a slack hand. I looked at the animal and I saw a thing I could not command, and I concluded it was a hazard. I was wrong about the conclusion." He paused, and the plates came down another degree, and for a moment he was only old. "I was not wrong about the premise. It cannot be commanded. I simply failed to consider that a thing which cannot be commanded might still be trusted. I did not have the framework. The human did. I will note for the record that she built, in 3 weeks, with a bowl of grain, an order I could not build in 11 cycles with a chain of command, and that when I could not understand her order I tried to kill it in the dark, and that this is the truest account of what I am, and the board should weigh it." He removed himself. It was, Mayhew thought, the only genuinely commanding thing she had ever seen him do. He did not wait to be removed. He entered his own relief into the record, requested transfer to a monitoring station at the edge of the ring's authority, and stood, plates low, and left, and the containment wing's low thrum came up faintly through the floor as he went, and Mayhew watched the old Thren flinch at it. One last time. At the sound of a superior he had never been introduced to and had failed, to the end, to salute. The contractor testified from a holding berth, and his testimony was short, and it was the part Mayhew kept. Asked why he had left the lance, he said, "The animal was calm." Asked to elaborate, he could not for a while, and then he said the thing that ended up in the record and then in the field literature and then, eventually, in a Concord ruling. "I have euthanized 400 large animals. They fight or they flee or they freeze. Those are the 3 things a cornered animal does, and I am trained for all 3. This one did a 4th thing. It decided. It looked at me and it decided how the morning would go, and it was so certain that I believed it before I understood why, and a creature you believe is not a creature you can put down. I have thought about it every hour since. I do not think it is an animal. I think it is a person who happens to be a tiger, and I think the human knew that on the first day, and I think that is why it loves her, because she is the only one of us who walked in already knowing." Mayhew believed the trouble was over. She was becoming, she reflected later, a slow learner about exactly one thing, which was how many kinds of frightened power there were, and how each new one arrived certain it was different from the last. The conquered assessor came 19 days after Sale left. Her name was Korath, and she was varying, tall, pale, narrow, a species who had met only twice, austere jurists who served the conquered standing committees the way the Thren served its academies, from a position of such deep procedural certainty that they rarely bothered to raise their voices. Assessor Korath had been sent, her credentials said, by the Standing Committee on Non-Signatory Biologicals, and she had been sent because the recording had done a thing that no one on the Ashran ring had thought through, which was that it had raised a question the whole conquered now had to answer. The question was not, is the animal dangerous? Everyone had stopped asking that. The question was, what is it? Because if the tiger was a beast, a controlled hazard, an apex-class carnivore, then the conquered's entire body of law knew what to do with it. It secured beasts. It licensed handlers. It registered enclosures. It set custody with the polity of origin and standards of confinement conquered-wide. And it did all of this the way it had done it for 400 cycles, and the framework was old and settled and safe. But if the tiger was a *person*, if the thing the contractor had said was true, if the thing Mayhew's graphs implied was true, if the thing an entire cohort of cadets had felt in their chests every morning was true, then the framework did not merely bend. It shattered. Because the conquered had 100 member species, and every one of them had, somewhere in its history, kept a beast, bred a beast, worked a beast, and the moment the Standing Committee agreed that a non-signatory apex could be a person, every one of those histories became a question, and the Kavani's 400 cycles of Skarn, and the Thren's hunting lines, and 1,000 quieter arrangements across the sector, all of it went from settled law to open wound in a single ruling. Assessor Korath had been sent to prevent that. Mayhew understood it the moment she read the assessment order. Korath was not there to determine whether the tiger was a person. She was there to determine, correctly and procedurally and with impeccable citation, that it was not to secure the framework, to file the animal safely back into the category of beast, to license it and register it and set it under standards, and to make the whole diplomatic wound close over clean, because the alternative was a legal catastrophe that no standing committee wanted on its cycle. She's going to rule it a beast, Mayhew told Wren the night before the assessment. She has to. It's not malice. It's the opposite. It's a jurist doing the responsible thing, closing the dangerous question before it costs 100 species their whole self-understanding. And once it's ruled a beast conquered-wide, the standards attach: licensed handler, registered enclosure, origin polity custody. Ren Earth is the origin polity. The custody standard will require a qualified xenofauna facility and a licensed handler, and you are a first-year cadet, not a licensed handler, and the enclosure standard will not be a training wing you eat breakfast in. She won't be cruel about it. She'll be correct. And correct will take him away just as surely as Sale's Lance, and there won't be a contractor to film, because it'll all be legal, and legal doesn't abort when you turn on a comm bead. Wren was quiet for a long time. She was sitting on the floor of the wing, on the yard side of the open mesh now. The mesh stayed open, these days, a fact the board had approved by the simple expedient of never discussing it, with Ash's head in her lap and her hand moving slow along the great gray ruff, and she looked, for the first time since Mayhew had met her, tired all the way down. "Then I'm not going to argue that he's a person," Wren said finally. "And what?" "You said she's there to rule he's not a person, and she has to, because if he's a person it breaks 100 species. Fine, I believe you. So I'm not going to make her choose between him and the whole conquered, because I'll lose that, and I should lose that, because 100 species worth of law is more important than one tiger, and I'd think less of her if she ruled the other way." Wren's hand went slow along the ruff. "So I'm not going to argue he's a person. I'm going to argue something she can actually give me." She looked up. "I'm going to argue about what kind of beast he is." She wants to file him back into the framework. Good. Let's talk about which drawer. Because there's a category the conquered already has, that's already law, that's 400 cycles old, that doesn't break anything, and Oswic's the one who's going to help me prove Ash belongs in it. I need you to send for the Kevani. The old one. Oswic. Tell him I said the word he wrote on his form. Tell him I said asterisk withdrawn, in respect, asterisk, and I want to know if he meant it. Oswic came. He came fast. On a chartered transit he paid for himself, and he came with the same white-muzzled scarn. And when he walked into the observation gallery and looked down into the yard and saw the mesh open and the human sitting inside it with the tiger's head in her lap, the old Kevani made a low sound Mayhew had not heard him make before, and did not translate, and did not need to. "You opened the wire," he said. "It was never for him," Ren said from the yard. "Come down, bring your animal. I need to show the assessor something, and I need you to tell her it means what I say it means, because you're the only one in the Conquered she'll believe about beasts, and because you already wrote it on a form once." Oswic came down. He brought the scarn into the feeding corridor, off its lead, which no Kevani did indoors ever, and the great war animal walked to the open mesh and looked into the yard at the tiger, and the tiger raised its head from the human's lap and looked back. And for a moment the whole wing held its breath, and then Ash rose, unhurried, and crossed the yard, and the two apexes met at the open mesh with nothing between them, the earth tiger and the Kevani scarn, and they did not fight, and they did not posture. And Ash lowered his head first, a hand's breadth, an old courtesy, and the scarn answered it, and the two of them stood a moment nose to nose in the daylight with 400 cycles of the Conquered's beast law dissolving quietly in the space between them, and then they lay down, side by side, along the open mesh and were still. "There," Ren said softly, "that's the argument, that's the whole thing. Mayhew, call the assessor. Tell her the human's ready to make her case, and tell her to come to the wing because I'm not making it in a hearing room. I'm making it here, at the 6th hour over breakfast, where she can watch two apex predators from two different worlds decide not to fight in front of her. And then she can tell me, to my face, in front of that the only law the Conquered has for what she's looking at is the law for a thing you put in a box." Mayhew made the call. And then she stood a while at the gallery rail, looking down at the human and the two great animals in the morning light of the daylight panels, and she thought about the first morning, 9 days and a lifetime ago, when she had crossed the observation gallery to the sound of an alarm that meant a keeper had run. And she found that she did not know any more what she would tell the assessor if the assessor asked her, under oath, what the thing in the wing was. She only knew that she had stopped being able to call it the specimen sometime in the last month, and that everyone else had too, and that a ruling which required an entire academy to go back to calling Ash a beast was going to fail, not because it was wrong in law, but because the law had arrived too late to a room that had already made up its mind, over breakfast, one morning at a time. Assessor Korath had read the file before she came to the wing, and the file had told her what to expect, and the file had been useless, which she noted with professional interest because files were rarely useless, and it meant something that this one was. She came to the containment wing at the 6th hour because the human had insisted, and Korath had allowed it because a jurist who refused to observe the thing she was ruling on was a jurist building a ruling on sand, and she disliked sand. She came alone, without clerks, and she stood at the gallery rail where 40 cadets of 6 species stood every morning, and she watched. The human came down at the 6th hour with a tray. She was exactly as unremarkable as the file said, small, plain, worn at the cuffs. She went through the open mesh into the yard, and the animal rose from its shelf and crossed to her, and Korath's oldest instincts, the varying wiring under 400 generations of jurisprudence, reported to her the same thing they had reported to every predator on the ring: senior. Yield. She did not yield, because she was varying and her people had made a civilization out of not yielding to instinct, but she noted the instinct, and she noted its strength, and she filed it because it was evidence, and it was evidence against the ruling she had come to make. The human sat. The animal lay down against her, its head in her lap. The human ate her breakfast. And a second great animal, the Kevani war beast, off its lead, which Korath knew was not done, came through the corridor and lay down beside the first. And the two apex predators of two separate deathworlds rested side by side in the morning light while a small human ate grain porridge between them. And around the gallery 40 young soldiers stood quiet and unafraid. And Korath stood among them and felt the thing they felt, the slowing in the chest, the held breath going out, and understood that she had been sent to rule against a room that had already been persuaded by a bowl of porridge, and that her ruling, whatever it was going to be a document filed after the fact about a decision the wing had made without her. This displeased her. She was varying. She resolved to be persuaded by argument or not at all, and she went down to the yard to be argued at, which no assessor did, and which she would later understand was the moment the human had already won, because a jurist who comes down to the floor has conceded that the floor is where the truth is. Ren did not stand up when the assessor entered the yard. Mehu, watching from the rail, understood why. The human had learned in a month that the whole power of her position was that she did not perform, and she was not going to start performing for a conquered jurist. She stayed on the floor with the tiger's head in her lap, and she gestured with her spoon at the empty span of yard floor across from her. "Sit down, assessor. There's no chairs. Ash doesn't like furniture in his yard. He thinks it's clutter. You want him filed as a beast. Let's do it right. I'm not going to waste your time telling you he's a person because you already know that if you rule him a person you break 100 species worth of law, and I'm not asking you to break anything. I read your committee's charter. You'd have to be an idiot to break it, and you're not an idiot, so I'm not going to insult you by trying. He's a beast. Fine. Rule it. I just want to talk about which kind of beast, because your framework's got more than one drawer, and you've been about to file him in the wrong one." Korath did not sit on the floor. She was varying. She folded herself down into the tall, angular crouch her people used in place of sitting, which put her eyes level with the humans, which was, she understood a moment too late, exactly what the human had arranged. "Continue," she said. "Your law for beasts has a default," Ren said. "Custody follows the polity of origin. You find an animal, you rule it a beast, you send it home to whatever government owns the world it came from, under confinement standards, and the government keeps it or studies it or puts it in a proper facility. That's the drawer you came here to use. Earth's the polity of origin. You'd send him to Earth, to a facility under standards, and it'd all be correct, and he'd stop eating in 11 days because I wasn't there, and you'd have followed the law perfectly and killed him anyway, and you'd never see it in your paperwork because grief isn't a confinement violation." She kept her voice flat. "But that's not your only drawer. You've got another one. It's older than the default. It's the one the Kevani have been standing in for 400 cycles, and it's why I sent for Asuik. Tell her, Asuik." The old Kevani at the rail spoke down into the yard. "The bonded working dyad," he said. "Assessor knows it. It is the oldest beast law the conquered has. When a skarn bonds to a handler, the conquered does not treat them as a beast and an owner. It treats them as a unit. A partnership. The custody of the animal follows the bond, not the polity. My skarn is not the property of my homeworld. It is the partner of me. And when I die, it does not go home to a facility. It goes to the handler I name, or it is released, because a bonded working animal separated from its bond is not a beast the law can safely store. 400 cycles we have known this. The dyad is registered as one. The law already bends this far. It bends this far for us every day." "So that's my argument," Ren said. "I'm not asking you to make Ash a person. I'm asking you to notice he's already in a dyad. Look at us. You've been watching for a month. Read your own instruments. Mehu's got the graphs. The bond's measurable. It's reciprocal. It's not me projecting on a house cat. It's a 400-kilo apex predator that reorganized its entire nervous system around one specific human, and would rather die than be filed away from her. And that is the asterisk exact clinical picture your dyad law was written for. He's not a beast to be sent to a polity. He's half of a working dyad, and the custody follows the bond, and the bond is me. You don't have to invent anything. You don't have to break anything. You just have to file him in the drawer you already have for exactly this, instead of the one that kills him. That's the whole argument. I'm done. Eat something, you came at breakfast. Korath was silent for a long moment. She was varying, and she was very good at her work, and she saw at once both the elegance of the argument and its single fatal flaw, and she named the flaw, because a jurist who let an elegant argument past its flaw was not a jurist. The dyad law, Korath said, requires that the bond be asterisk trained. A skarn is bonded to its handler through 400 cycles of selective breeding and a decade of deliberate work. The dyad is a made thing, a worked thing, an artifact of the handler's craft, and the law protects it because the craft is real and the polity of origin has, in effect, licensed it. Your bond is 3 weeks old. You did not breed this animal. You did not train it. You are not a licensed handler. You sat down and ate. By what standard is a bond you did not make and cannot demonstrate you can control a asterisk working dyad, and not merely, she paused, and chose the cruelest true word available, because it was her duty to test the argument at its weakest joint, a stray that has imprinted on the first kind stranger. The law protects craft. Where is your craft? The yard went quiet. Mayhew at the rail felt her 3 hearts drop because it was the right question, the killing question, the question a good jurist had to ask, and because she did not know the human's answer. Wren did not answer right away. She looked down at the animal in her lap, at the great gray and orange head, at the yellow eyes that had opened at the assessor's hard tone and turned now to read the human's heart rate, to check whether the change in the room was a threat. And Wren put her hand flat on the tiger's brow, and the animal, reading her calm, let its eyes fall closed again, and its breath went out slow, and Wren looked up at the assessor and said the thing that Mayhew wrote down that night and kept for the rest of her career. You think craft is the training, Wren said. That's your mistake, and it's the same mistake Sale made, and it's the same mistake the whole Conquered makes. And it's why you've got 100 species who can build a beast and not one who can be trusted by a wild one. The Kevani craft isn't the breeding. Ask Oswick. The breeding just makes it faster. The craft is the asterisk showing up. It's the 10 years of being the same, being calm, being reliable, being there tomorrow whether the animal's ready or not, until the animal stops being afraid, and the breeding is a shortcut around the fear. That's all. It's 400 cycles of making the fear smaller so the showing up takes 10 years instead of 30. I didn't have the shortcut. Ash isn't bred to trust anybody. He's bred by a deathworld to trust asterisk nothing. Everything on his world spent 1,000,000 years trying to kill his line, and he is the sum of every ancestor that trusted wrong and died of it. And I did the craft anyway, the long way, with no breeding and no license and no shortcut, in 3 weeks with a bowl of porridge, because the craft was never the breeding. The craft was the calm. And you want to know where my craft is? She looked at the assessor, flat, unhurried, certain. You're sitting in it. You came down to the floor. Assessors don't come down to the floor. You came down because some part of you already knows the truth is down here and not in your hearing room. And the reason you feel safe enough to crouch in a yard with 2 apex predators off their leads is that there's a small human between them eating breakfast and being calm, and your body read my calm and slowed down to match it before your mind gave it permission. That's the craft. It's working on you right now. I've been doing to you for 5 minutes what I did to him for 3 weeks, and it's the same thing, and it's the only thing, and it doesn't need a license because it can't be faked. Because you're a predator too, assessor, under all the law, and you can smell a lie, and you can smell that I'm not telling you one. Korath did not rule that day. She told them she would not rule that day, and she told them why, which no varying assessor was required to do, and which Mayhew understood was itself a kind of yielding. The argument is sound, Korath said, unfolding to her full pale height. The dyad drawer exists. The custody follows bond principle is 400 cycles settled. If the bond is a genuine working dyad, the animal need never be sent to a polity, and no personhood question need be reached, and the framework is preserved, and the human keeps her tiger, and every party is served but the ones who wanted the animal dead, whom the law does not serve anyway. She looked down at the human and the two great animals. I am not troubled by the law, I am troubled by the fact. You assert a working dyad 3 weeks old, untrained, unlicensed between a human and a deathworld apex, and you assert that its craft is a thing you call calm, which is not in my instruments and not in my citations, and which I felt 5 minutes ago work on my own body against my will. I am a jurist. I do not file rulings on things I felt. I file them on things I can demonstrate. So before I rule, you will demonstrate it. Not to me, to the conquered. How, Ren said. There is a proceeding, Korath said, for contested dyad registration. It is old and it is rarely used, and it is exactly suited to this, which tells me the drawer was built wider than its builders admitted. The claimant handler must demonstrate the working dyad before a panel, must show that the bond is reciprocal, that the animal will take direction and give trust, that the pair functions as a unit under observation, that it is craft and not accident. The Kevani prove it every generation when a new handler claims a scarn. You will prove it the same way, and you will prove it in front of a panel I will convene, drawn conquered wide, because a ruling this novel cannot be made by one assessor in a training wing. It must be witnessed, or it will be overturned, and if it is overturned, your tiger goes to a polity after all. So, in 19 days, the panel convenes. You will show them a working dyad, or you will show them a stray that imprinted, and the difference will decide everything, and I cannot tell you which one you have, because I have watched you for a month, and I still do not know whether I am looking at the finest piece of animal craft in the conquered or the luckiest accident in its history. 19 days, Cadet. Show me which. She left, and Ren Halloran sat on the floor of the yard with the tiger's head in her lap and the scarn beside her and 19 days in front of her, and she looked up at Mayhew at the rail, and for the first time since the contractor, something that was almost a smile moved across the plain, unremarkable face. A demonstration, Ren said, in front of the whole conquered of me and Ash. Doing what we do. She looked down at the animal and her hand went slow along the gray ruff. Mayhew, what do we do? You eat breakfast, Mayhew said. We eat breakfast, Ren agreed. In front of the entire conquered, God help them. The trouble with the 19 days, Ren decided on the second of them, was that everyone wanted to help, and helping was the one thing that could break the whole demonstration before it started. The Thren came first. A delegation of instructors, plates at a careful middle height, arrived at the wing with a proposal they had clearly labored over, a training regimen. They had taken Mayhew's behavioral logs and reverse-engineered from them a protocol, a sequence of conditioning steps, a schedule of reinforced approaches, everything a proper conquered institution built when it wanted a reliable result, and they laid it out for the human with the grave pride of predators who had solved a problem, and Ren listened to all of it. And then she said the thing that Mayhew would later realize was the true beginning of the doctrine. No, Ren said, and I want to tell you why, because you're going to write it down eventually, so you might as well write down the right thing. You've built me a program to make asterisk the calm. You can't make the calm. The second it's a program, it's a performance, and he'll smell the performance and the calm will be gone. And then we've got a stressed apex predator doing a routine in front of a conquered panel, which is the exact disaster you're trying to prevent. The calm isn't a technique I do to him. It's a fact about me that he checks every morning. Your program is you asking, how do we control the animal? Wrong question. The right question is, how do we build a person the animal can rely on? And you don't build that person with a conditioning schedule. You build her the slow way, the same way every morning until reliable stops being a thing she does and starts being a thing she is. There's no protocol for that. There's just showing up. You want to help? Don't build me a program. Protect the mornings. Make sure that whatever the conquered throws at us in the next 19 days, the 6th hour stays exactly, boringly, identically the same. That's the whole regimen. Keep it boring. Boring is the craft. The senior Thren instructor was quiet for a moment. Then she took out her slate and she deleted the conditioning protocol she had labored over, and she wrote in its place a single line, and she showed it to Ren, and it said, "The regimen is that there is no regimen. Protect the ordinary. Do not improve it." "May I title it?" the instructor asked, with a gravity that Ren was learning to recognize as the Thren falling in love with an idea. "For the record." "It's your record," Ren said. "Title it whatever you want." The Thren titled it Calm Rhythm, the first doctrine of the reliable presence, and entered it into the Academy's standing orders, and within a week 3 other academies across the sector had requested the file, and within a month a Kevani training school had adopted it, and Ren Halloran, who had wanted only to be left alone to eat her breakfast, had, without writing a word of it, founded a school of thought. The codification, once it started, could not be stopped, and Mayhew documented it with a scientist's helpless fascination, because it was the funniest and the most sincere thing she had ever watched a civilization do. The Thren were a martial culture, and a martial culture presented with a thing that worked does the only thing it knows how to do with a thing that works. It makes it a doctrine, names it, ranks it, and issues it. And so the ordinary, boring, deliberately unremarkable business of a girl eating breakfast next to a tiger was, over 19 days, disassembled by earnest alien soldiers into its component parts and reassembled as a body of formal practice, each element gravely titled, each title entered into a growing standing order that the cohort took to reciting. The slow, even breathing became calm rhythm. The refusal to look directly at the animal in the early days, the offering of the unguarded neck, became the open posture. The fixed schedule, the same hour every morning, became the reliable hour. The rule that Ren would not put her hand through the mesh until there was no mesh, would not fake a closeness the barrier made safe. The Thren found almost unbearably profound, and titled The Honest Distance, and wrote 2 pages on it. And a Thren cadet cried during the reading, which among the Thren was done by a lowering of the dorsal plates so complete that the whole hall went flat in sympathy. And the breakfast itself, the grain porridge, the wedge of protein loaf, the bitter coffee that alarmed the medics, became, in the standing order, the shared ration asterisk, and the Thren wrote of it that the human did not feed the animal from her hand, did not offer the ration as a reward, did not make the food a transaction. She simply ate her own food in its presence, at the same hour, every day, and let the animal understand that they were 2 creatures having a meal in the same place, equals at a table, and the Thren found in this a whole philosophy of command, that the deepest loyalty is not bought with reward but earned by the simple, radical act of eating beside someone as though they were your equal. And they titled that page asterisk The Table Between Equals, asterisk and Provost Sales Replacement. A younger Thren named Sivanu, who had watched all of it from the wing gallery every morning, made it the first line of the Academy's new charter. "They have written 11 doctrines," Mayhew told Asifal, the legal adjunct, "about a girl eating oatmeal. And the terrible thing, Asifal, the thing I cannot get past, is that every one of them is asterisk true. I keep reading them looking for the joke, and the joke is that it works. She has taught an academy of soldiers more about loyalty in 3 weeks with a spoon than 400 cycles of command theory, and she does not know she has done it, and if you told her she'd tell you she was just having breakfast. That," Asifal said, "is why it works." Oswick stayed for the 19 days, and Oswick was the one who saw the trouble coming, because the trouble came from his own people. The Kevani Beast Corps did not like the dyad claim. Oswick had known they wouldn't, and he had come anyway, and he sat with the human in the wing on the 9th evening and told her the shape of it plainly, because she had earned plain. "You have made an enemy," he said, "and it is not the assessor and it is not the ghost of the old provost. It is my core. Do you understand why?" "Tell me." 400 cycles, Oswick said. "We have bred the scarn and bled for the scarn and buried the scarn, and the whole dignity of the Kevani, the whole reason a poor gray pack people from a hard world sits at the conquered's table at all, is the craft. The bonded dyad is asterisk ours. It is the thing we do that no one else can do. It takes 10 years and it takes a lineage, and it takes a handler willing to give a decade of his life to one animal, and it is hard, and the hardness is the honor. And here comes a human girl who did it in 3 weeks, with no lineage, no breeding, no decade, no core, with a bowl of grain, and she is going to stand in front of the conquered and say this is a working dyad same as yours, file it in the same drawer." He looked at her, not unkindly. "Do you see it? If the panel agrees, then the thing that took my people 400 cycles to earn, a human did over breakfast. It does not feel to my core like you are joining us. It feels like you are erasing us. Like you are saying the craft was never hard, that we bled for a shortcut, that a soft-hearted stranger with no discipline can match the Kevani in a month. There will be a Kevani on your panel. The core will make sure of it, and that Kevani will not be Oswick. It will be someone who has decided, before you say a word, that you are a threat to everything his people are, and he will be looking for the one thing that ends you. He will be looking for the moment your comm breaks in front of the panel, because if your comm breaks, then it was never craft, it was luck. It was a stray that imprinted, and the core is safe, and their 400 cycles are still theirs alone." Ren was quiet. Ash lay against her, half asleep. "He's not wrong to be afraid of that," she said finally. "The erasing, that's a real thing to be afraid of." She thought about it. "I'm not going to fight him on it. When I get up there, I'm not going to say I matched the Kevani. I'm going to say the opposite. I'm going to say I did the long way, the hard way, without their shortcut, and that the reason I could do it at all is that their people spent 400 cycles proving it asterisk could asterisk be done. That every morning I sat in this yard, I was doing a thing the Kevani discovered, that I learned the craft from watching what your dyads meant, even though I never saw one till Ash met your scarn. That the calm is the Kevani's gift to the whole conquered, and I'm just the first outsider who took it seriously enough to try it the long way. I'm not there to erase your core, Oswick. I'm there to tell 100 species that your core was right about the most important thing in the galaxy, and nobody was listening. Your hardliner wants to fight me for the credit. I'm going to hand him the credit. You can't fight somebody who's agreeing with you." Oswick looked at her for a long moment, and then the old Kevani did the thing he had done at the gallery glass the first day, the graveside gesture, except this time he did it toward the human, palm flat held, and he said, "My scarn chose to lie down beside your tiger. I did not understand then that the scarn had better judgment than the core. It knew what I am only now sure of." He rose. "I will testify, not for the core, for the craft. And when the hardliner comes for your calm, girl, and he will come for it, he will do something in that chamber to make the animal afraid, because a frightened animal cannot demonstrate a dyad. You remember that the calm was never yours to lose. It is a thing you do asterisk for the animal, not a thing you hold for yourself. When he frightens the room, do not defend your calm. Spend it. Give it all to Ash, the way you have every morning, and let the panel watch you do the one thing no bread handler ever has to do, hold the line for an animal with nothing but your own steady heart. That is a thing my core has forgotten it costs, because we bred the cost away. Let them remember what it looks like paid in full." They fought about the venue, and Ren won, because she was right, and because the assessor, to her credit, could recognize a right thing even when it inconvenienced a proceeding. The Kevani hardliner, his name was Vesuk, and he was core to the marrow, and he arrived 4 days before the panel with the settled contempt Oswick had promised. Wanted the demonstration held in a formal proceedings chamber on the ring's administrative deck, sterile and neutral and full of strangers, and everyone understood why. Because it was the worst possible place for the animal, A strange, cold room full of unfamiliar species, and no daylight and no routine. The exact conditions most likely to make an apex predator wary. And a wary apex predator could not demonstrate calm. And if it could not demonstrate calm, the dyad claim died. Wren refused. She refused flatly in front of the assessor, and she gave her reason, and her reason won. "You want to test whether I've built a reliable presence," she said, "by dragging the animal into the single most unreliable situation you can construct, and then ruling that if he's nervous in it, the bond isn't real. That's not a test of the dyad. That's a test of whether I can perform the dyad on your terms, in your room, on your schedule. And the whole point, the entire thing I've been telling you for a month, is that it isn't a performance. If I could make Ash calm on command in a strange room full of strangers, then Vesuk would be right. It would be a trick, and you should rule against me. The proof that it's real is precisely that I can't do that the calm only exists inside the ordinary, inside the reliable hour, in a place he trusts, at a time he knows. You want to see a working dyad? Then you have to come see it where it works. You have to come to the wing, at the 6th hour, and you have to watch us do the most boring thing in the Conquered and understand that the boringness is the entire achievement, and that anyone who needs it to be dramatic to believe it has understood nothing." She looked at the assessor. "The Kevani prove a new dyad on the handler's ground at the handler's work, not in a courtroom. Oswick will confirm it. My ground is the wing. My work is breakfast. Bring your panel to the yard, or admit you're testing something other than what you claim." Assessor Korath ruled on the venue in under a minute, which for a Varian was the equivalent of a shout. "The panel convenes in the containment wing," she said, "at the 6th hour on the 19th day. The claimant demonstrates the dyad at its work, on its ground per Kevani precedent. Anyone who cannot render a fair judgment while a human eats breakfast may recuse now." She looked, when she said it, at Vesuk. Vesuk did not recuse. He should have. On the 19th morning, Assessor Korath stood in the containment wing at the 6th hour with a panel of 9 drawn from across the Conquered, and she watched a human eat breakfast, and she understood before the porridge was half gone that she had already lost control of her own proceeding, and that this was correct, and that she had convened the panel precisely so that it could lose control in front of witnesses. The panel stood along the gallery where the cadets stood every morning, and the cadets stood behind them, because Korath had refused to clear the wing. The ordinary was the thing under examination, and the cadets were part of the ordinary, and a demonstration of the reliable hour with the reliable hour's own witnesses removed would have proven nothing. 9 jurists and 40 cadets, and Mayhew at her censors, and Oswick at the rail with his white-muzzled scarn. And below them, in the yard, in the open, the small human sat cross-legged with her tray, and the great gray and orange animal lay against her with its head in her lap, and the two of them did the most boring thing in the Conquered, while 100 species worth of law waited on the outcome. Korath had come prepared to judge a bond. She had not come prepared for what the bond did to the room, and the room was in her report because it was evidence, and she was a jurist, and she did not omit evidence because it inconvenienced her. The room went calm, all of it. She watched it happen on Mayhew's public feed, and she felt it happen in her own 3-chambered chest. 40 cadets and 9 jurists and 2 old beast handlers, predators every one, standing in the presence of an apex that outranked their oldest instincts. And instead of the bracing, the plate locking, the held breath that the animal had once produced in everyone, the room settled, because the animal was calm, and the animal was calm because the human was calm. And the human's calm ran out through the open mesh and up the gallery wall and into 49 nervous systems and slowed them, one at a time, the way a single steady hand on a frightened creature's flank slows its heart. It was the craft. It was working on the panel. Korath had told the human she would not file a ruling on a thing she felt, and now she stood in a room where the thing she felt was the entire case, and she understood that her whole discipline had been built 400 cycles ago, precisely to protect jurists from ruling on the true thing in the room, and that the true thing in the room was a girl eating oatmeal, and that it was going to be the soundest ruling of her career. And then Vesuk broke it, because Oswick had promised he would, and Oswick knew his core. It happened fast, and Korath's account of it, reconstructed afterward from Mayhew's frame by frame, because no one's eyes had been fast enough, was the account the whole conquered eventually read. Vesuk had positioned himself at the near end of the gallery, close to the ramp that led down into the feeding corridor, and no one had questioned it because a panelist could stand where he liked. And at the moment the demonstration was at its calmest, at the moment the room had most fully settled, at the moment the case for the dyad was closing itself without a word spoken, Vesuk moved. He came down the ramp fast, 3 long Kevani strides, into the corridor, through the open mesh, into the yard, and he did the thing his whole core had bred out of itself 400 cycles ago and could no longer imagine paying for. He lunged at the human. He did not mean to reach her. Korath was certain of that afterward and said so, and it did not save him. He meant to spike the animal. He was core to the marrow, and he knew apex predators, and he knew that the one thing that would shatter the demonstration was a sudden violent threat to the bonded human, that an animal defending its person could not also be a calm animal, that the moment Ash rose to kill in defense of Ren, the panel would see a dangerous beast doing what dangerous beasts do, and the dyad claim would die in the same second, and the Kevani's 400 cycles would be safe. He lunged at the girl to make the tiger a monster in front of the only witnesses who mattered. It was a good plan. It was the same good plan the drone officer had almost had, and the contractor had almost had, and it failed the same way, because all 3 of them had understood the animal and none of them had understood the human. The tiger was between them before Vesuk finished his first stride. Korath had the frames. 400 kilos of apex predator came off the human's lap and crossed 2 meters of yard and put itself between Ren and Vesuk in a span of time that Mayhew's instruments measured, and that Korath declined to include in the public ruling, because she judged that no member species needed to carry that number around in its imagination. The animal did not leap at the Kevani. It did not open its mouth. It planted itself, a striped wall, its shoulders higher than the crouching human behind it, and it filled the space between the girl and the threat with its whole living bulk, and it looked at Vesuk, and it held. That was the thing. That was the entire ruling, and every jurist on the panel saw it, and none of them ever forgot it. The animal held. It stood a body length from the creature that had just lunged at its person, with every right and every reason and every ancestral instinct screaming at it to close the distance and end the threat forever, and it did not close the distance. It stood and it looked at Vesuk with the flat yellow patience that Korath had seen in the file and not believed, and it waited, because behind it, on the yard floor, the human had not screamed, had not scrambled back, had not done a single one of the frightened things that would have told the animal the threat was real enough to answer in blood. The human had put her hand on the tiger's flank. Korath watched her do it on the feed. Ren Halloran, with a Kevani Beast Corps veteran frozen 2 meters away, and 400 kilos of her own apex predator strung between them like a drawn wire, did not flinch back. She reached forward, and she put her flat hand on Ash's gray flank, the flank that was rigid with the whole coiled readiness of a thing deciding whether to kill, and Korath's instruments caught the human's breathing go long and even, the asterisk calm rhythm, the deliberate loud unmistakable signal broadcast through her whole body into the animal's side. There is no emergency. I am not afraid. Hold. And she said, quietly, so quietly the gallery bead barely caught it. Not a command, not a correction. The same 2 words she had said to the drone-frightened animal weeks before and to 1,000 frightened creatures in a cold sanctuary before that. Easy, Ash. And the tiger held. The rigidity went out of the gray flank under the human's hand. Mayhew's sensors have the graph, the exact second, the held breath going out, and the animal, given permission by the one nervous system in the galaxy it had chosen to trust, chose not to kill. It stayed between the human and the Kevani, a wall, a warning, an absolute and unmistakable statement of what would happen if the threat took one more step. But it did not take the step itself, because its person had asked it not to, and it trusted its person more than it trusted its own oldest and most reliable instinct, which is the definition in Kevani law, 400 cycles settled, of a working dyad. Vesuk stood 2 meters from the animal he had tried to make into a monster, and understood, in the part of him older than his core and his grievance and his fear, that he had proven the exact opposite of what he came to prove, that he had staged, in front of 9 jurists and 40 cadets, and the entire watching Concord, the single most complete demonstration of a bonded working dyad in the history of the beast law. An apex predator, provoked past every limit, choosing restraint on the calm word of its bonded handler. He had not broken the calm. He had shown the panel what the calm was asterisk for. He had shown them that its whole purpose, the entire craft, was this: the ability of one steady human heart to hold the line for an animal that could not be commanded and did not need to be, because it had been given something better than a command. It had been given someone to trust. "Withdraw, Vesuk," said Oswick from the rail in the trade cant in a voice like a closing door. "You have testified. You did not mean to. Withdraw before you testify further." Vesuk withdrew. He backed out of the yard the way the contractor had, never turning his exposed back to the animal, and it was the last professionally correct thing he did in the Beast Corps, because the corps that had sent him to break the human watched the same recording the conquered watched, and a corps whose entire dignity rested on the working dyad could not survive having sent a man to disprove one, and having him prove it instead, at the cost of nearly killing a foreign national in front of a conquered panel. The corps did not discipline him. It did something worse and older and entirely Kevani. It struck his name from the handler lines, and gave his scarn to another, and entered in the space on the form where a handler's career ended a single word in the trade cant, and the word was not withdrawn in respect. The word was the other one, the one Oswick had once been careful to avoid, and it meant, in the old Kevani sense used only of a handler who had betrayed the craft, unbonded. In the yard in the aftermath, the human sat down again. That was the thing Korath put at the very center of her ruling, the observation on which the whole novel judgment finally turned, because it was the thing that no bred dyad in 400 cycles had ever quite managed to show her. Ren Halloran, with the danger past and the Kevani gone and the panel silent in her own heart, Mayhew's sensors confirmed it, going at a speed that would have justified any reaction at all, did not stand up in triumph, did not comfort herself, did not so much as look up at the 9 jurists who held her tiger's whole future in their judgment. She sat back down on the yard floor in the settling quiet, and she reached for the animal that was still strung tight from its own restraint, still coming down from the edge it had been asked to hold, and she gathered the great gray head back into her lap, and she put both hands on it, and she breathed the long, even asterisk calm rhythm into it until the coiled readiness went out of it entirely and the low-content thrum came back, and only when the animal was calm, not her, the animal, did she attend to herself at all. She had spent her calm. Korath understood it now, the thing Oswick had told the girl to do not defend your calm, spend it, give it all to Ash. The human had held a nervous system steadier than her own for the length of a killing decision, had loaned an apex predator her composure the way you loan a drowning creature your breath, and had spent every bit of it, and had not asked for a moment of it back until the animal was whole again. That was the craft. That was the whole craft, entire, demonstrated in 90 seconds under maximum provocation in front of the only witnesses in the galaxy who could rule on it. Not the ability to command an animal, but the willingness to be the calm the animal could not be for itself, at whatever it cost, first, every time, before you tended to your own fear. Korath looked at the human and the tiger in the yard, the girl breathing steady into the gray ruff, the animal's eyes closing, the two of them making, between them, the only genuinely calm thing in a wing full of predators who had all just been reminded of what they were. And Assessor Korath of the Varine, who did not file rulings on things she felt, took out her slate to file a ruling on the only true thing in the room, and found that her own hands were not entirely steady, and noted it, because she was a jurist, and she did not omit evidence because it inconvenienced her. Assessor Korath ruled at the close of the 6th hour, in the wing, standing, which no assessor did. A ruling was a document, filed from a chamber, read into a record. It was not a thing a Varine spoke aloud in a training yard while a cadet gathered up a breakfast tray. She did it anyway, and the doing it anyway was, Mayhew understood, the ruling's true first clause, the part that never made it into the written text but that every witness carried out of the wing. The Concord's law had come down to the floor. "The claim is granted," Korath said. "The pairing of the human cadet Ren Halloran and the deathworld apex designated in this record by the name Ash is registered as a working dyad under the 400-cycle precedent, custody following the bond, and not the polity of origin. The personhood question is not reached and is expressly left open, as a matter for a proceeding better suited to it than this one, which I do not envy." A dry Varine almost humor, gone as fast as it came. The dyad demonstrated its working character under provocation, exceeding any standard the Beast Corps applies to its own handlers, and I note for the record that the provocation was supplied by a member of this panel, and that his testimony, though not the testimony he intended to give, was the most valuable rendered here, and that the Corps has already answered for it in its own way, which the Conquered will not improve upon. She paused, and she looked at the human, and then she did the thing that turned an Academy footnote into a matter the whole Conquered would spend the next several cycles arguing about. "I make one finding beyond the claim," Korath said, "because a jurist who sees a general truth inside a particular case and files only the particular has failed her office. The claimant argued, and the record now demonstrates, that the craft of the bonded dyad, which this committee has for 400 cycles treated as the exclusive and bred capability of a single-member species, is not in fact a bred thing. It is a practiced thing. It can be done without lineage, without breeding, without license, by any patient creature willing to pay its true cost, which is the discipline of being reliably calm in the presence of a frightened thing until the frightened thing decides to trust you. The Kevani did not invent this. The Kevani discovered it and shortened it with their breeding, and then mistook the shortcut for the craft, and guarded the shortcut as though it were the thing itself. It is not. The thing itself belongs to no one. It is available to every species in this Conquered that is willing to sit down and be still and show up tomorrow. I find that this is the most important discovery entered into this committee's record in my tenure, and I find that it was made by a first-year cadet with a bowl of grain, and I find that the fact that it took a non-signatory outsider to make it is an indictment of every one of us who had 400 cycles and a breeding program and never once thought to simply be trustworthy and wait. She closed the slate. That is the ruling. The dyad is registered. The wing is theirs. And the committee will be forming a study group, which I will chair, on the general application of what the standing orders of this academy have already, I am told, titled the Reliable Presence. Cadet Halloran, the Conquered would like very much to learn how to do what you do. I suspect you will tell us it cannot be taught, and I suspect you will be wrong, and I suspect the argument will outlive us both. "You can't teach it," Ren said, gathering her tray. "But you can catch it. That's different. Nobody taught these cadets. They just watched somebody be calm for a month and caught it. That's how it moves. You want the Conquered to learn it. Don't build a curriculum. Just make sure there's a room somewhere where somebody's being calm every morning and let people come stand in it until it takes. That's the whole method. It's very boring. You'll hate it. It works." Korath looked at her for a long moment, and then the austere pale jurist inclined her narrow head, a Varine bow, the first May who had ever seen a Varian give to anyone below a standing committee, and she gave it to a 20-year-old with a breakfast tray, and then she left the wing to go and be, May who suspected, quietly and permanently changed by a thing she had come to file safely away, and had instead let all the way in. The word went out from the ring the way the first recording had, except that this time it was not a curiosity. It was a precedent, and precedents move. Within a cycle, the request came not to Earth's liaison office, which was still learning it had teeth, but to the Ashran Academy directly, from 3 separate conquered institutions, and then a 4th, and then more than Mayhew could track. They did not ask for tigers. That was the thing Mayhew found she had to explain over and over to the excited and the frightened alike. The conquered did not want the animal. The conquered wanted the asterisk method. Word had gone out that a human had walked into a room with the most dangerous thing in the sector, and gentled it with nothing but the discipline of showing up, and every institution in the conquered that had ever failed to manage a difficult beast, or a difficult recruit, or a difficult population, had looked at the recording and understood that it was not watching a story about a tiger. It was watching a story about how you earn the trust of a thing that has every reason not to trust you, and there was not a government in the sector that did not need to know how to do that. And so the strange, quiet thing happened, the thing that Mayhew put at the end of her career-defining paper, and that Asifal, the legal adjunct, said, correctly, would be the line people remembered when the science was forgotten. Earth's contribution to the conquered, the first thing the newest and least of the signatory species gave that the old powers actively wanted, lined up for, sent delegations to learn, was not a weapon, and not a technology, and not a fleet. It was a way of sitting still. It was a discipline any of them could have discovered in 400 cycles, and none of them had, because they had all been too busy being predators to learn how to be reliable. Humanity's first export to the stars was the craft of being calm in front of a frightened thing until it decided you were safe. And the demonstration model, the proof of concept, the thing the delegations came to the ring to stand and watch every morning at the 6th hour, was a small, unremarkable girl and a deathworld apex predator having breakfast. They came for soldiers, Asifal said, watching a delegation of 6 species stand quiet and slow-hearted along the gallery rail one morning, catching the calm off a girl and a tiger the way the cadets had. 11 months ago the conquered looked at Earth and asked what the deathworld could offer that the civilized worlds could not, and it meant, though it was too polite to say so, what can you kill that we cannot? And Earth sent a cadet and her breakfast. And it turns out the thing the deathworld learned, that none of the safe worlds ever had to, is how to sit down next to the thing that could kill you and not be afraid, because on a deathworld everything can kill you, and if you spent your life afraid, you would never sit down at all. They learned calm the hard way, because they had no other way. And now they are teaching it to a galaxy that had 400 cycles of peace and never needed to learn it and is only now watching a girl eat oatmeal, understanding that it never learned to be still. He was quiet a moment. They did not send us their apex predators, Mayhew. That is what everyone misunderstands. They sent us the one thing that could stand calm beside an apex predator. They sent us the girl. The tiger is just the proof. Sale sent word from his monitoring station at the edge of the ring's authority, once, near the end. It came to Mayhew, not to Ren, and it was brief, and it was not an apology, because Sale was too old and too proud to apologize, and Mayhew would have trusted it less if he had. It was a single line, entered in the formal Thren register a departing officer used to record a judgment he wished preserved, and it said, I ran this academy for 11 cycles on the belief that order is issued from above, and I was relieved by a cadet who built a better order from the floor with a spoon. And I have spent my exile understanding that the difference between us was that I required the room to be afraid of me, and she required nothing of the room at all, and that the second kind of authority is the only kind that a frightened thing will ever willingly obey. And that I learned this too late to be anything but a cautionary line in someone else's doctrine, Title it as you like. Mayhew titled it nothing. She entered it unedited into the record beside the other doctrines, and she left it untitled on purpose, because some things a martial culture codifies and some things it should be made to sit with unresolved, and the sight of the old provost's plain confession standing nameless among the gravely titled pages did more, she thought, to teach the cadets what Sale had gotten wrong than any doctrine could have. They read it every morning on their way to the rail. It had no title. It did not need one. It was the thing the whole academy had learned, written by the one person who had learned it the hardest way there was. And Oswick stayed. He requested transfer of his registration to the Ashran ring, and he brought his white-muzzled scarn, and he became, in the strange new thing the wing was becoming, the first instructor of a discipline the conquered had never had before. The teaching of the reliable presence to beast handlers who had spent their whole lives learning to command and had never once been taught to simply be trusted. He taught it beside the human. They made, the old gray Kevani and the small plain human, an unlikely pair of instructors, and the cadets who passed through their yard in the cycles that followed of a dozen species, from 100 worlds, all learned the same first lesson, which had no curriculum and needed none, and which they learned by standing at a rail in the morning light and watching two apex predators from 2 deathworlds and a girl with a breakfast tray do the most boring and most difficult thing in the galaxy together. At the 6th hour every single day, whether anyone was ready or not. 2 cycles on, the containment wing was not a containment wing anymore, though no one had ever formally renamed it, because the name that had grown up around it could not be entered in a standing order and everyone used it anyway. The cadets called it the yard. Not the exercise yard, not the study yard, the way you say a thing when there is only one of it and everyone knows which one you mean. The glass that had once been rated to stop a boarding lance had been left in place because tearing it out felt wrong, but the inner mesh was gone entirely, folded away and never rehung, and the daylight panels ran warm all through the 6th hour, and the whole space had become the one thing at the Ashran Academy that every cadet of every species passed through in their first cycle and remembered for the rest of their lives. Mayhew ran it now. She had been offered a fleet posting twice, at ranks that would have made her family's whole lineage sit up, and she had turned both down without much thinking about it, because she had come to the wing on a morning 2 cycles ago to the sound of an alarm that meant a keeper had run, and she had never quite left, and she had understood somewhere in the 2nd cycle that she was not going to. The work that mattered was here. The paper had changed her field. The field could have her paper. The thing itself, the living thing, the reliable hour and the craft of it, and the slow, steady transmission of calm from one nervous system to the next across species lines that 400 cycles of conquered science had thought impermeable. That was here, in the yard, every morning, and Mayhew had decided she would rather watch it happen than be promoted away from it. The delegations still came. They came less breathlessly now, because the novelty had worn into something better than novelty, into practice, into a discipline that a dozen institutions taught and a dozen more were building. But they still came to see the source, and Mayhew still walked them down to the gallery rail, and she still watched their oldest instincts fight their training when the animal rose from its shelf and their whole biology reported *senior, yield, and she still watched the calm take them, one delegate at a time. The held breath going out, because the girl was still there every morning being still. The girl was not a first year anymore. Ren Halloran had graduated the general cohort, near the middle of it unremarkably, exactly as she had done everything except the one thing, and she had been offered commissions and refused them, and had instead accepted the post the academy had invented because it did not know what else to do with her, warden of the yard, a title the Thren had labored over and that Ren found funny and answered to anyway. She taught the first lesson to every incoming class. She did not teach it with words. She taught it the way it had always been taught, which was that she sat down in the yard at the 6th hour with her breakfast and let them watch, and the ones who were going to catch it caught it, and the ones who needed longer took longer, And no one failed because there was no test, because the thing had no failure state except leaving, and almost no one left. And Ash was older. That was the thing Mayhew watched most carefully now, with the tenderness she had stopped pretending was unprofessional. The gray in his coat had spread up from his flanks into his ruff and along his spine, the wood smoke deepening toward true frost, and he moved a little slower off the sunshelf in the mornings, and he slept more, and he had, in the way of old great cats, become if anything gentler, as though the last of whatever a deathworld had built into his line had finally, in safety, in the reliable warmth of the daylight panels and the reliable hour and the reliable person, been allowed to set down. He still came to the mesh that was not there every morning. He still put his head in her lap. He still made the low-content thrum that Mayhew had recorded on the first day, and that now played, softly, in the memory of every cadet who had ever passed through the yard. The sound the most dangerous thing in the Concord made when nothing in the world was wrong. The newest delegate arrived on an ordinary morning near the end of the third cycle, and she was afraid. And Mayhew recognized the fear because Mayhew had felt it herself once, on a morning that seemed now to belong to a different person. The delegate was Thune, a young diplomat of a species Mayhew had not met before, the Selanth. A small, careful people from a warm-water world, new to the Concord, newer even than the humans, and sent to the ring to learn the thing everyone now came to the ring to learn. And Ambassador Ithan Selan's aide, the young Thune, had read the file, and the file had told her what to expect, and the file had been useless, and she stood at the gallery rail with her whole slight body drawn tight and her breathing shallow, looking down at the deathworld apex predator in the yard, and she said to Mayhew, in a small voice, the thing that Mayhew had heard 100 delegates say, and that never stopped meaning something. "It is not afraid of us." "No," Mayhew said. "Everything in the file said it should be afraid. It is a captured animal, far from its world, surrounded by predators of a dozen species. Every model says it should be afraid or aggressive or broken. It is none of those things." It is the young Selanth searched for the word. It is at peace. How is it at peace? How is anything at peace here in a cage among strangers? "Watch," Mayhew said. "The 6th hour is about to start. You will understand more from 3 minutes of watching than from 3 cycles of the file." Everyone does. And the 6th hour started, the way it had started every morning for 3 cycles in a lifetime, and Ren Halloran came down to the yard with a tray from the mess grain porridge, a wedge of the pale protein loaf, a mug of the black bitter coffee the medics had finally stopped worrying about, and the old gray and orange animal rose from his sun shelf, slower now, and crossed to her, and lay down against her, and put his frosted head in her lap. And the young frightened Selanth at the rail watched a small, unremarkable human sit down cross-legged on the floor beside 400 kilos of apex predator, and without hurry, without ceremony, without the slightest sign that she found any of it remarkable, begin to eat her breakfast. And Mayhew watched the calm take the young delegate. She watched it the way she had watched it take 40 cadets and 9 jurists, and a fleet's worth of delegations, and 1 austere varying assessor, the shallow, tight breathing slowing, the drawn body easing, the held breath going out all at once the way the tigers had on the very first morning, the whole nervous system of a frightened stranger reaching out across the rail and the daylight and the gulf between species to catch the steadiness of a girl who was doing nothing at all except being reliably, deliberately, radically calm in the presence of a thing that could kill her, and choosing not to be afraid, and letting everyone in the room borrow the choice. "Oh," the young Selanth said softly, which was what they all said in every language when it finally reached them. "Yes," Mayhew said. "That." The girl looked up once, the way she always did, and found the new frightened face at the rail among the calming ones, and gave it the small, flat, almost smile she had for the newest and most afraid, the smile that said asterisk, "You'll be all right. Everyone is. It's just breakfast." And then she went back to her porridge, and the old tiger's breath went out slow against her, and the low-content thrum came up through the floor of the yard and into 49 nervous systems and steadied them. And another delegate of another species stood at the rail of the strangest and most important classroom in the Concord and began, without being taught, to learn the one thing the deathworld had to teach. Mayhew stood beside the young Selenth and watched the thing she had watched 2,000 mornings now and never tired of, and she thought about the first morning, about the alarm that meant a keeper had run, about the frightened old provost with his plates locked high, about the 9 days the animal had waited in its box for someone not to be afraid of it, and she thought about how close it had all come to ending in a dose of something quiet at the 5th hour before anyone understood what they had, and she thought. The way she thought every so often, standing at this rail, about how much of what mattered in the galaxy turned, in the end, not on the biggest force in the room but on the calmest one. "Will it always be here?" the young Selenth asked, watching the old cat sleep in the girl's lap. "The animal is old. When he is gone, will the yard still?" "The animal is the proof," Mayhew said gently. "He is not the thing. He never was. The thing is the girl and the craft and the reliable hour, and that will be here as long as there is someone willing to sit down and be still and show up tomorrow," which she watched the young frightened delegate's breathing go slow, and even without the delegate noticing, watched the calm move into her and make its home, which there will always be now. That is what he is really for, not to be gentled. To teach a galaxy that the gentling was possible, he did that. He has been doing it every morning for 3 cycles, and every creature who ever stood at this rail carried a little of it out with them, and they will carry it further than he will ever go. That is the most any of us manage. He managed it from inside a cage, with a bowl of grain, by lying down and being calm. I have stopped being embarrassed to say that I think it is the most important thing I have ever witnessed. The young Selenth was quiet. The 6th hour went on. Below in the light, the girl finished her breakfast, and set the spoon in the bowl, and did not get up, and let her hand rest flat on the old frosted head in her lap. And the two of them, the small plain human and the aging apex predator from the deathworld, the unlikeliest and most complete working dyad the Concord had ever registered, sat together in the warm daylight of the yard, in the reliable hour at peace. While a galaxy that had once sent a fleet to ask what the deathworld could kill for it stood quietly at the rail, morning after morning, and learned, instead, how to be still. And when the delegates had gone, and the gallery had emptied, and the daylight panels had dimmed toward the middle of the day, Wren Halloran stayed a while longer on the floor of the yard with the old tiger's head in her lap, the way she stayed a while every day, past the reliable hour, into the unremarkable quiet after, when there was no one to demonstrate anything to and nothing to prove, and no one watching but Mayhew, who had stopped counting as watching a long time ago. "They came back again," Wren said, to the animal or to Mayhew or to no one. "The new ones, another whole species who wanted to know how it's done." Her hand moved slow along the gray rough, the wood smoke and the frost. "I keep telling them there's no how. There's just tomorrow and then the tomorrow after that." The old tiger's eyes were closed. His breath went slow. You'd think somebody in a whole galaxy would already have figured out that the thing everyone's looking for is mostly just showing up, but they never do. They always come looking for the trick. She was quiet a moment in the dimming light, and then she said the last of it, softly, to the sleeping animal she had gentled with nothing but her own steady heart, the most dangerous thing in the Concord, asleep in the lap of the one creature who had never once been afraid of it. "There's no trick, Ash," she said. "There was never any trick. There was just me, and there was just you, and there was breakfast." She let her head tip back, the way she had on the very first morning, and closed her eyes in the warm, fading light, and the old tiger slept on in her lap, and the yard was quiet, and the reliable hour was over, and tomorrow it would come again exactly the same, which was the whole of it, which was everything, which was the one thing the deathworld had learned that the safe old galaxy never had, that you do not win the trust of a frightened thing, ever, with the biggest force in the room. You win it with the calmest one, and then you come back tomorrow,